The year was 1878. The Arizona Territory did not just wake, it caught fire. Light, thin, and sharp, struck the eastern mesas first, turning the world a deep, bruised purple, then a blazing red. This was the land of the dying, the people. It was a place of impossible beauty and casual cruelty. Dust, fine as blood, rose in the morning wind, coating the juniper and the sage. In the distance, from the deep shadows of Canyon de Chelly, the high, lonesome cry of a coyote split the silence. Tazi was already moving. He was a man made of the same red earth he walked upon. His movements so fluid they seemed part of the wind itself. He was near the sacred spring, a place his people seldom visited anymore, not since the soldiers had built their fort so near. He was tracking, his eyes fixed on the ground. Not deer, not antelope, horses, shod horses. He read the story in the dirt. 12 riders. They had passed this way less than an hour ago. He knew the tracks of army horses. He was, after all, an army scout. He counted them again. 12. Not enough for a patrol, but too many for a simple message. He relaxed, but only slightly. 12 horses were not enough for a massacre. He had seen what a massacre looked like. The memory was always there, waiting behind his eyes. Bosque Redondo, the long walk. He had been a boy, but he remembered the hunger. He remembered the wail of mothers whose babies froze in the winter marches. He remembered the taste of spoiled corn, the sickness, the shame. He had sworn on his grandmother's grave that he would never let his people be rounded up again. So he played a game. He wore the blue coat when asked. He guided the soldiers through the canyons they did not understand. He took their silver dollars, and he watched. He counted their bullets. He measured their rations. He lied. He told them the deer tracks led west when his people were hunting east. He was a traitor to the army, a necessity for his people. It was a heavy weight, and it was breaking him slowly, miles away. The world was made of lurching wood and stale air. Eliza Hart braced herself against the shuddering wall of the stagecoach, her knuckles white. She was 21 years old. She was traveling toward Fort Defiance, and she was terrified. In her lap, she clutched a heavy wooden box. Inside were her only weapons books, slates, chalk, a primer on grammar, and a worn copy of Shakespeare. In the pocket of her dress, a letter from her father felt like a stone. It was heavy with threat. Behave. He had written, "This teaching nonsense is a temporary foolishness. Charles Benton has made a generous offer. If you do not return to your senses and accept him, you will find your allowance cut off. Charles Benton, the son of a railroad tycoon, a man who smiled with his teeth but never his eyes. Eliza would rather be eaten by wolves." "You are very quiet, Miss Hart," said the woman sitting opposite her. She was a major's widow, draped in black crepe, her face a mask of weary disapproval. "I'm just taking in the scenery, Mrs. Gable," Eliza said, though the scenery was only a wave of red dust. A man beside the widow, a fur trapper who smelled of beaver grease and cheap whiskey, spat a brown stream of tobacco juice toward the floor. "Not much to see but dirt and heat," he grumbled. "And savages. You here to meet a husband, Missy?" Eliza straightened her spine. The coach was hot, and her collar was choking her, but she would not show weakness. "I am here to open a school, Mr. Silas." This caused a moment of silence. Mrs. Gable looked horrified. "A school, goodness! The post chaplain already teaches the officers' children." "I am aware," Eliza said, her voice clear and steady. It was the voice she practiced in the mirror, the one that did not tremble. "I plan to teach everyone. The soldiers' children, the laundress's children, and the Navajo children, if their parents will allow it, Mr. Silas laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Teach a redskin, you are wasting your time. Missy, you cannot teach an animal. Only thing they understand is a bullet. They are not animals." "Sir," Eliza said, her face flushing, "they are people. Their children have a right to learn, just as we do. Perhaps if we spent more time with books and less with bullets, this land would be more peaceful." Mrs. Gable fanned herself, as if Eliza's words had personally offended her. Such ideas. You are very young. My dear, you will learn. The West is no place for Eastern softness. The army is here for our protection. The railroad is bringing civilization. And the savages, well, the savages are simply in the way. Eliza fell silent. She looked out the window, at the vast, unforgiving emptiness. She had come here to escape one prison, only to find herself in another, one made of hard beliefs and casual cruelty. Taji had reached the top of the mesa. From here, he could see for 50 miles. The air was clear. He saw the stagecoach, a tiny black speck crawling toward the fort. He had been watching it for an hour. Then he saw the others. They were not the 12 soldiers he had tracked earlier. This was a new group, 6 riders. They were keeping parallel to the stagecoach, using the canyons for cover, staying just out of sight. Tazi's blood went cold. He focused, wishing for the spyglass the colonel sometimes let him use, but he did not need it. He could see the details. They wore army boots. They rode army horses, but they wore breechcloths over their trousers, and in their hair, they wore feathers. Tazi cursed, a low sound lost in the wind. The feathers were wrong. They were tied wrong. They were hawk feathers, dyed badly, meant to look like Navajo war tokens to an untrained eye. It was a lie, written on the landscape. He knew in the pit of his stomach. This was not a pursuit. It was a performance. They were not chasing the stagecoach. They were following it, waiting for the right, isolated place. They would attack the coach, kill the passengers, and leave Navajo, evidence, behind. The army would cry for vengeance. The railroad, which wanted the land cleared, would get its wish. He had to move. He was too far to stop the attack directly, but he knew the land. He knew the shortcuts. He scrambled down the scree slope, his pony waiting patiently below. He swung onto its back, his hand instinctively touching the small, smooth turquoise amulet he wore beneath his shirt. It was a gift from his grandmother, a blessing for protection. He urged the pony into a reckless gallop, heading toward the narrow pass where the ambush would surely happen. Inside the stagecoach, the heat was becoming unbearable. Eliza, feeling sick from the motion and the conversation, leaned her head against the window frame. She looked out at the towering wall of red rock, scanning the horizon for anything other withering scrub. For a single heartbeat, she saw him, high above, on the rim of the canyon. A lone rider sat on his horse. He was just a silhouette against the blinding white sky. She could not see his face, only his shape. He was native. That much was clear. He sat motionless, a sentinel watching their tiny, fragile world crawl by. She felt a strange shiver, a feeling that was not fear, but something else, recognition, as if the land itself was watching her. Then he was gone. He turned his horse and vanished into the stone, as if he had never been there at all. Eliza Hart kept staring at the empty space, her hand pressed against the glass, unaware that her fate, and the fate of the man on the mesa, had just become hopelessly intertwined. The world narrowed to a slit of blinding sky between 2 walls of red rock. The stagecoach driver, a man named Henderson, cursed. Damn it. Canyon's tight here. Perfect place for trouble. His words were still hanging in the hot, dry air when the first shot cracked open the silence. It was not a warning. A patch of dark red blossomed on Henderson's chest. He slumped forward, the reins slipping from his lifeless hands. The stagecoach bucked, the horses screaming and rearing in their harnesses. Inside, it was chaos. Misses! Gable shrieked, a high, thin sound that cut through the wood. Mister! Silas fumbled for a pistol inside his coat, his face pale and greasy. Eliza Hart was thrown against the door. For a moment, her mind went white with shock. Then the door was ripped open. Men, 6 of them. They were on horseback, their faces covered with dirty rags. They wore feathers in their hair, badly tied, and streaks of red paint on their chests. They screamed, a high, ululating cry that was meant to sound like a war whoop, but felt wrong. Practiced. Another bullet splintered the wood near Eliza's head. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. Beside her, a little girl who had been traveling with Mrs. Gable, a niece perhaps, sat frozen, her mouth open in a silent scream. "Get down!" Eliza yelled. She grabbed the child by the arm and yanked her to the floor of the coach, throwing her own body over the small, trembling form. Get out," a voice snarled. A large, rough hand grabbed Eliza's satchel, the one with her books. "No," she cried, clinging to it. It was the only thing that was hers. The man ripped it from her grasp and threw it to the ground. He was large, smelled of whiskey and sweat, and his eyes, above the mask, were blue and cold. He pointed his pistol directly at her face. "Quiet, or I will send you to hell." Eliza froze. She was trembling so violently she could feel her teeth chattering. The metal of the gun barrel looked huge, dark, and final. But through the fear, a hot spike of anger shot through her. She stared back at him, meeting his cold blue eyes, refusing to look away. He hesitated, surprised by her defiance. His finger tightened on the trigger. A sound, like a hawk's whistle, cut through the air. The man's pistol flew from his hand, spinning into the dust. He howled, clutching his right hand, where a black-fletched arrow was now embedded through his palm. Eliza looked up. He was there, on the cliff rim above them, outlined against the sky. The man from the mesa. Taji. He was a phantom, his bow already raised again. Another arrow flew, striking a second attacker in the shoulder, sending the man tumbling from his horse. Then Taji was gone from the rim. For a second, Eliza thought he had vanished, but a rope snaked down the rock face, and he slid down it, landing in the canyon dust with the lightness of a cat. He moved like nothing Eliza had ever seen. He was not a brawler like the men she had seen in eastern cities. He was a force of nature. He drew a knife. The man with the arrow in his hand, the one who had threatened her, charged him with a yell. Tazi did not meet the charge. He stepped inside it, a blur of motion. The knife moved. The man simply stopped, a look of profound surprise on his face, before he crumpled to the ground. Two other attackers, seeing their leader fall, spurred their horses toward him. Tazi did not run. He knocked an arrow, drew, and fired in one impossible, fluid motion. The lead rider clutched his chest and fell. Tazi dropped his bow, rolled onto the belly of the second horse, and came up on the other side. The rider, confused, turned, but Taji was already there, pulling him from the saddle. It was over in less than a minute. 3 men were down. 1 was wounded, and the last 2 were galloping away as fast as their horses could carry them. Silence fell, heavy and absolute, broken only by the whimpering of the child beneath Eliza and the groans of the man with the arrow in his shoulder. Eliza slowly pushed herself up. Her dress was torn, her hands scraped raw. She looked at the leader, the man with the blue eyes who had threatened her. He was lying on his side, as he had fallen. His mask had ripped away, and his shirt had torn open at the neck. Eliza saw it. It was not a tribal amulet. It was not beadwork. It was a small, brass pin, shaped like a locomotive, glinting in the harsh sunlight. Underneath it, letters were stamped into the metal, Benton Rail. Her blood ran cold. Charles Benton. Her father's letter. The railroad. Her eyes darted around. Mr. Silas was helping a moaning Mrs. Gable out of the coach. The child was crying. The Navajo warrior was busy disarming the wounded man. No one was looking at her. Quickly, before she could second-guess herself. Eliza knelt beside the dead man. Her hand, shaking, reached out and ripped the pin from his shirt. The metal was still warm. She closed her fist around it and shoved it deep into the pocket of her skirt, the sharp edges digging into her palm. Taji approached the one attacker still alive, the one with the arrow in his shoulder. He was a young man, pale with fear and pain. Tazi knelt beside him, his face as hard and unreadable as the canyon stone. He spoke, his voice low and guttural. First in his own language. The man just shook his head, babbling. Taji switched to clipped, clear English. "Who sent you? Who paid you to wear the feathers?" The man, cradling his shoulder, looked at the dead bodies of his friends. "I do not know. Just the boss." Big boss, at the fort." A single, sharp crack echoed from the rim of the canyon. The wounded man's head snapped back, a small, dark hole appearing in his forehead. He fell back, dead. Taji instantly grabbed his bow and scanned the cliffs, but there was nothing, just rock and heat. The sniper was gone. The last piece of the puzzle had been erased. He stood up, his face grim. He turned his gaze to the stagecoach, to the passengers huddling in the dust. His eyes met Eliza's. She was horrified. She had just seen 4 men die. She was covered in dirt, and her hands were shaking, but she was also mesmerized. This man, this savage as Mr. Silas had called him, had moved with a deadly grace. He had saved them. He seemed as much a part of this land as the Red Rock, and just as dangerous. He was accustomed to death. She could see it in the set of his shoulders. Tazi, in turn, looked at her, the white woman. He had expected screams, hysterics, fainting. He had seen it before, but this one, she had not screamed. She had shielded the child, and now she was not looking at him with terror, but with a strange, piercing intensity. She was tougher than she looked. He found the thought inconvenient. He turned away, checking the dead driver. Henderson was gone. Taji grimly took the reins of the lead horses and cut the dead man free. He would drive the coach. The rest of the journey was silent. "Mrs." Gable sobbed quietly. "Mr." Silas drank heavily from a flask. Eliza sat, her hand in her pocket, clutching the brass pin until her knuckles ached. They reached Fort Defiance as the sun turned the sky to orange peel. The fort was a square of adobe and wood, a scar of civilization on the endless land. Soldiers in blue uniforms manned the gates, and they snapped to attention as Taji, still on the driver's box, guided the coach inside. A man stepped out of the adjutant's office, his uniform immaculate, his buttons polished. He had a thick gray mustache and cold, assessing eyes. This was Colonel Nathan Briggs. "Report," he barked, striding toward the coach. His eyes swept over the blood, the arrow holes, and landed on Taji. "We were attacked, Colonel," Taji said, his voice flat. He pointed. 6 riders, dressed as Navajo. They killed the driver. I stopped them." Briggs' eyes narrowed. "Dressed as Navajo. You are certain?" "They were not Dine," Taji said, his voice quiet but firm. "Their feathers were wrong. They rode shod horses." Colonel Briggs let out a sigh, a sound of practiced impatience. Taji, always defending. We have rogue bands, you know this, Apaches, even your own people, disgusted with the treaty. They attack civilians, and you scouts are too proud to admit it." He turned to the passengers as they stumbled out. "Mrs. Gable, are you harmed? A terrible business? Another brutal Navajo attack on innocent civilians?" Eliza felt a jolt, as if she had been slapped. He was twisting it. Instantly, Taji, still standing by the horses, went rigid. Eliza saw his jaw tighten, a muscle flexing in his cheek. He was being overruled, his expert testimony dismissed as native pride. "Colonel," Taji started, "the man we captured alive. He said he was hired by someone at the fort. Then he was shot, from the rocks, by a rifle." Briggs actually laughed, a short, sharp bark. Shot, of course, his own kind, silencing him. A classic tactic. "You see, it proves my point. It was a war party, and you were lucky to escape." Elise watched Taji. She saw the flash of fury in his dark eyes, the way his hand clenched at his side. He wanted to argue. He wanted to scream the truth. But then she saw him do something strange. He lowered his head. He looked at the dust. "Yes, Colonel," Taji said, his voice suddenly hollow. Perhaps it was a rogue band. It is hard to be certain in the dust." Eliza's stomach dropped. He was lying. The proud, dangerous man who had fought like a demon was now bowing his head and agreeing to a lie. She looked at him, confused and angry, and she saw the shame flicker in his eyes. He hated himself for saying it. He was doing it to survive, to stay in this man's good graces, to keep his position as a scout. He was trapped. "Colonel Briggs," Eliza said, her voice shaking but loud. "That is not what happened." Every head turned. "Mrs." Gable gasped. Colonel Briggs fixed her with his cold, gray eyes. "Ma'am." Eliza's hand went to her pocket, her fingers closing around the metal pin. "The men who attacked us, they were—" Briggs's gaze was like ice. It was not threatening. It was worse. It was assessing. He glanced at her dusty, torn dress, her Eastern face, her box of books now lying in the dirt. "You must be Miss Hart," he said, his voice suddenly smooth, almost paternal. "The new school teacher. You have had a terrible shock. You are safe now. You are under the protection of the United States Army. I am sure you are exhausted and confused. A woman of your refinement. You are not used to the harsh realities of this land. We will take care of everything." He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten her. But the message was crystal clear. You are new here. You are alone. You are a woman, and you depend entirely on me. Eliza looked from Briggs's cold, smiling face to Tazi's shuttered one. The truth was in her pocket, sharp and heavy, but she was a single woman, hundreds of miles from anyone she knew, and she had just been told, politely, to be quiet. She swallowed. "Yes, Colonel, I am very tired." She took her hand out of her pocket. Empty. The lie settled between them all, thick and choking, like the red dust that covered everything. The school was not a building. It was a suggestion. Colonel Briggs, with a dismissive wave of his hand, had granted Eliza the use of a derelict supply shed at the far end of the post. It smelled of mildew, old leather, and rat droppings, but it had 4 walls, a roof that mostly held, and a patch of dirt out front that served as a yard. Eliza, with the help of 2 young soldiers who seemed more bored than hostile, had dragged out broken barrels and crates. They had fashioned a few crude benches. She had her blackboard, a precious item she had protected on the entire journey, and her chalk. On the first day, 6 children came. 2 were the tow-headed sons of a sergeant. 3 were the daughters of the post laundresses, painfully shy and wearing dresses made of faded flour sacks. The 6th was a boy named Eli, the nephew of Mrs. Gable, who had been sent purely to report back on Eliza's suspected insanity. By the 3rd day, there were 10, and by the end of the first week, there were 12. 2 Navajo children, a boy and a girl, had appeared at the open doorway. They wore no shoes, and their shirts were torn, but their eyes were bright with a fierce, burning curiosity. They did not speak. They just watched from the shadows by the door. Eliza, seeing them, felt her heart give a painful squeeze. She smiled, a slow, gentle movement, and gestured to an empty bench. "Come in," she said, her voice soft. "There is room." They did not move for a long time. But the next day, they were sitting on the very back bench, and the day after that, they brought a friend. She taught them their letters. A, B, C. She taught them to count. 1, 2, 3. And she drew. She was not a good artist, but she was patient. She drew a picture of one of the great mesas that dominated the horizon. Then she drew a picture of a smaller, greener hill from her memory of home. 2 mountains, she said, pointing. "See, this one is rock, this one is grass, but they are both mountains, and they both stand under one sky." The white children looked confused. Eli Gable snickered, but the Navajo boy in the back, the one with the serious eyes, watched her hand and then repeated, in a whisper, the Navajo word for sky. Eliza heard him. She turned, her heart leaping. "What did you say?" The boy shrank back, afraid he had done wrong. "No," Eliza said quickly, moving toward him. "It is all right. Please, say it again." He looked at his friend, then back at her. "Yeah," he whispered. Eliza smiled, a brilliant, genuine smile. "Yeah," she repeated, her pronunciation clumsy. "Sky." She pointed to the board. "Sky." She pointed to the sky outside. "Yeah." The reaction in the fort was immediate. and it was not pleasant. "It is a disgrace. Mrs. Gable announced loudly in the sutler's store, where Eliza was trying to buy a small bag of beans. "She is letting those filthy redskins sit in the same room as our children? It is unnatural. What diseases are they bringing in?" Eli Gable, emboldened, had taken to throwing small rocks at the Navajo children as they left the shed. But the laundresses, the women whose opinions mattered least to the officers' wives, saw it differently. One of them, a thin, tired woman named Mary, stopped Eliza by the parade ground. "Miss Hart," she said, clutching a basket of blue uniforms. "My Sarah. She wrote her name yesterday on the slate. I never, no one in my family ever—" "Thank you, Miss." And so Eliza found herself in a small war, armed only with chalk and drawings of mountains. Taji came to the fort 3 days later. He was a scout. He had to report. He hated the adobe walls, the smell of too many men and horses in one small place, the sharp angles of the buildings that seemed to cut the sky into pieces. He tied his pony, his movements economical, his face a mask of indifference. He was walking toward Briggs's office when he heard it, the sound of children's voices. Not playing, but reciting. 2 + 2 = 4. He stopped. The sound was coming from the old, rotting supply shed. He drifted closer, staying in the shadow of the overhang. He looked inside. He saw her. She was standing in front of a blackboard, her back to him. Her dress was simple, a gray cotton, already stained with dust at the hem. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, but tendrils of it had escaped to curl around her face, which was damp with perspiration from the heat of the small, crowded room. She was surrounded. Children, White and Dine, were clustered around her, noisy, restless, and utterly captivated. She was calm. She was patient. As he watched, she knelt by the smallest Navajo girl, the one who had been terrified, and gently guided her hand to make a letter on a slate. A strange feeling, one he could not name, tightened in Tazi's chest. He had only seen this woman in a state of terror, or in a moment of forced public submission to Briggs. Here, in this broken-down shed, she looked free. She looked strong. Her eyes, when she smiled at the little girl, were gentle. He felt a softening, a dangerous warmth. He quickly crushed it. She was a white woman. She was part of their world, the world of forts and soldiers, the world that had tried to erase his. Gentleness was a luxury he could not afford, and involvement was a form of suicide. He turned away from the door, his face hard again, and went to find the colonel. The meeting with Briggs was short, cold, and filled with lies. Taji reported that the lands were quiet. He mentioned seeing Apache tracks far to the south, a useful distraction. He did not mention the railroad surveyors he had also seen, miles north of their permitted line. Briggs, in turn, dismissed him, tossing him his pay in silver coins as if feeding a dog. Taji left the office, the coins heavy and dirty in his hand. He needed water for his pony. He headed for the well in the center of the parade ground. She was there. The children had gone. The sun was low, painting the fort in shades of orange and purple. Eliza Hart was at the well, hauling a heavy wooden bucket, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. She pulled the bucket onto the stone lip and saw him. She started, her hand flying to her throat. Taji stopped. He did not want to talk to her. He just nodded, a curt dip of his chin, and moved to the horse trough. "Wait." Her voice was quiet, but it carried in the evening air. He paused, his back to her. "The other day," she said, "on the road, I never thanked you. You saved my life. You saved all of our lives." He said nothing. He began to untie the waterskin from his saddle. She walked closer, stopping a few feet behind him. He could smell her, not the heavy perfume of the officers' wives, but a faint scent of chalk, soap, and sun-baked dust. "You are Taji," she said. It was not a question. "I asked the soldiers. They said that is your name." He turned slowly. He looked at her. Her face was smudged with chalk dust. She looked tired, but her eyes were just as he remembered them from the coach, intense, clear, and unblinking. "I am Taji," he said. His voice was rough from disuse. "I am Eliza Hart." He nodded again. "The schoolteacher." A small, surprised smile touched her lips. "You know, I saw," he said, gesturing toward the shed. "It is a loud place." "It is," she agreed, her smile fading. She took a breath. "Why did you do it?" His eyes narrowed. "Do what?" "Why did you lie to Colonel Briggs I was there? You know those men were not Navajo. I know it. But you stood there and you let him. You agreed with him." Tajay felt a flash of anger. What did this white woman, with her books and her chalk, know of his choices? "My reasons are not for you, schoolteacher." He turned back to his horse. "Was it because you were afraid?" she pressed. He spun around, his movement so fast it made her take a step back. He was close now, close enough for her to see the lines of bitterness etched around his mouth. "Afraid," he said, the word a low growl. "You know nothing of fear." He pointed a finger, not at her, but at the wall of the fort. "That man, Briggs, he is not a man. He is a piece of paper. A piece of paper from Washington that says he owns this land, that he owns me. He pays me in silver to tell him what he wants to hear. Sometimes the truth is not worth the price." His contempt for Briggs was so raw, so open, it startled her. He was not just a scout. He was a prisoner, playing a part. "But it was a lie," she insisted, though her voice was softer now. It lets them hate your people for something they did not do. They will hate us anyway," Taji said, his voice flat and dead. "They do not need a reason. A lie, a truth. It is all the same to them. It all ends with a rifle." Eliza felt a chill. Despite the heat, she saw the trap he was in, and she saw her own. She thought of the brass pin hidden in her trunk. She had kept it, a small, dark secret. She made a decision. She would not reveal her whole hand. Not yet. She was still feeling her way in this dangerous new world. But she would show him one of her cards. "They did not look like Navajo," she said, her voice a near whisper. "The man I saw up close, the one who threatened me, his eyes were blue." Taji's gaze snapped to hers. He had been expecting fear, or pity. He had not been expecting observation. He studied her face, searching for a trick. "Many men have blue eyes, and they do not wear, whatever that pin was, from a railroad company." She had said it. She had dropped the stone into the water, and she watched the ripples spread across his face. He did not show shock. He showed nothing, but his eyes went from anger to something much colder, much deeper, stillness. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice lethal. "A railroad pin," she said, her own heart suddenly beating faster. "On his shirt. I saw it. I have it." Taji looked at her for a long, unbearable moment. He looked at her as if she was a snake he had just found in his blankets. "You should throw it away," he said, his voice quiet. "You should forget what you saw. You should teach your children and stay inside the walls." He turned, finished with his horse, and swung into the saddle in one smooth motion. He looked down at her. "You are not in the East anymore. Schoolteacher, some things here, if you pick them up, they will burn you." He rode away, leaving her standing by the well, her heart hammering against her ribs. Miles away, in the colonel's comfortable lamp-lit office, a different conversation was taking place. Colonel Briggs poured 2 glasses of whiskey. "To civilization, Charles," Briggs said, handing a glass to the man opposite him. Charles Benton smiled. He was handsome, in a severe, well-tailored way. His suit was dark wool, absurdly hot for the territory. But he did not seem to sweat. He accepted the glass. "To progress, Colonel, and to the Benton rail line, which is the engine of that progress." "Indeed," Briggs said, taking a sip. "But your engine is stalled. My friend, this valley." "The damn treaty says it is Navajo land. My hands are tied." "Treaties can be renegotiated," Charles said lightly. especially when one party proves to be a bad partner, hostile, even like attacking stagecoaches, threatening settlers. Am I wrong? Briggs swirled his whiskey. We had an unfortunate incident, but my best scout, the Navajo, Taji, insists it was not his people. Charles raised a perfectly plucked eyebrow. Your scout, a savage, and you believe him, Colonel? You are a military man? I'm a businessman. We need this valley. My father is not a patient man. He needs justification. Something to send to the senators back east. Proof that the current arrangement is not working. Proof that the army needs to clean house. For the safety of everyone. Of course. Briggs was silent, staring into his glass. These justifications, they can be messy and expensive. My men are soldiers, not actors. The last group was sloppy, Charles said, his voice hardening. They left a survivor, and I'm told my property arrived on that very coach. Briggs smiled, a slow, ugly movement under his mustache. Ah, yes, Miss Hart, a lovely girl, very spirited. She is already trying to teach the local savages to read. She is my fiancée, Charles said, the words sharp. A fact she seems determined to forget. Her father and I have an agreement. And that, Briggs said, is where our interests align. He leaned forward. You want your valley. I want retirement, somewhere a long way from this dust. You help me, I help you. We create enough incidents, and I will have no choice but to declare the treaty void and move the Navajo out. The valley is yours. And Eliza, Charles asked, a spirited woman, in a place this dangerous? Briggs shrugged. She will need a protector, a strong husband to guide her, once she is properly humbled by the realities of this place. I am sure she will be grateful to accept your proposal. She will be my gift to you. Charles, for services rendered. Charles Benton took a drink. He did not know about the brass pin, but he knew about Eliza's father. It is more than a proposal. Colonel, Charles said, setting his glass down. It is a contract. Her father signed the papers 3 months ago, in exchange for 5,000 shares of Benton rail stock. As far as the law is concerned, my father bought her, and I am here to collect. Tazi rode hard, the silver coins from Briggs feeling like hot stones in his pouch. He rode toward the canyons, toward the cluster of hogans where his family waited. He rode away from the fort, from the smell of lies and whiskey. But he could not rid himself of the image of the schoolteacher's face, her intelligent, terrified eyes, the way she had whispered. A railroad pin. He arrived at his grandmother's hogan as the last light left the sky. Kinyani, his younger brother, was outside, sharpening a knife. The village was quiet. Too quiet. You are late, Kinyani said, not looking up. I was with the colonel, Taji said. An elder, a man with a face like a dried apple, emerged from the shadows. He pays you well to lie to him. Taji's face tightened. I do what I must, while you do what you must, the elder said. More blue coats arrive. They scout the North Ridge. They count our sheep. The children are afraid to go to the spring. They say the white men are measuring the land to take it. Taji looked at the ground. He had seen the surveyors. He had not reported it. The line, Taji, the elder said, his voice sad. The one you walk, it is not there anymore. You are either Dine, or you are one of them. Taji had no answer. He looked out into the darkness, toward the fort. He thought of the man with blue eyes. He thought of the railroad, and he thought of the white woman who held a secret sharp enough to get them all killed. The rope he had been walking for years had just snapped. Colonel Briggs summoned Tazi at dawn. The air was cold, and the colonel's office was the only place in the fort that felt colder. Taji, Briggs said, not looking up from a map spread across his desk. Your report of quiet was, as usual, incomplete. We have received word of a supply wagon hit near the South Pass, more of your rogue band. Taji stood motionless. He knew of no such attack. It was another lie. You will take a squad. 10 men, under Captain Harris, Briggs continued, finally looking up. His eyes were flat, like gray stones. You will lead them. You will find these fake Navajo robbers, as you call them, and you will deal with them, or lead us to the village that is hiding them. The words hung in the air. It was a trap. A perfect, simple trap. If he led them nowhere, he would be branded a traitor to the army. His use as a scout finished. If he led them in any direction, Captain Harris, a man known for his hatred of the Dine, would find a reason to attack the first Hogan he saw. If he led them, by accident, to his own village. Taji's blood ran cold. Briggs was testing his loyalty, or rather, forcing his hand. He was being ordered to betray his people or be destroyed himself. Taji inclined his head. The familiar mask of indifference slipped over his features. As the colonel commands, when do we leave? At noon, Briggs said, already turning back to his map. The scout dismissed. Taji walked out onto the parade ground, the sun just beginning to warm the dust. He did not go to the barracks. He went to the sutler's store, a place he normally avoided. He bought a small bag of tobacco and 2 pounds of coffee. He walked to the edge of the fort, where a few Navajo, families of other scouts, were camped. He found his brother, Kinyani, mending a bridle. Kinyani looked up, his eyes full of the same suspicion Taji saw in the elders. Taji dropped the bag of coffee at his brother's feet. Kinyani's eyes widened. Coffee was a luxury. I am taking the blue coats south, Taji said, his voice low, speaking in their own language. Looking for ghosts. Kinyani understood. A gift of coffee. A ride south. It was a warning. And the sheep? Kinyani asked, his voice casual. The sheep, Taji said, should be moved to the high pastures, the North Ridge, where the water is hidden. He met his brother's eyes. The women and the children should go with them. It is a long way. They should leave now. A long ride for nothing, Kinyani said, already standing up, coiling the leather bridle. But the air is good in the north. Go, Taji said. He turned and walked away, not looking back. He had bought his family one day, maybe 2. He now had to lead 10 armed soldiers on a hunt for men who did not exist, a balancing act that would almost certainly get him killed by one side or the other. Eliza received the mail packet when the weekly courier arrived. A thin, exhausted man, caked in alkali dust. She recognized her father's crisp, angular handwriting immediately. She took the letter to her small, hot room, the one she had been given near the laundress's quarters. She sat on her cot and opened it. Her hands were trembling. She had written to him after the attack, a desperate, edited-down version, hoping for some word of comfort, perhaps even permission to come home. The letter was 4 pages long. It was not comforting. Your behavior is a source of profound embarrassment. He wrote, running off to the desert was bad enough, but this talk of attacks and railroad pins is hysterical. You sound mad. Eliza, I have assured Charles Benton that you are simply overwrought from the journey. He is a patient man, but he is not a fool. He is in Arizona now. As you know, overseeing the expansion. He is our future, your future. You will be nice to him. You will accept his hand, which is far more than you deserve, and you will secure this family's position. I have made sacrifices. Eliza, I have signed contracts. I have built this. You will not be the one to tear it down with your childish rebellion. This is not a request. Your future and ours depends on it. She read the words, signed contracts. She read, I have built this. She read, your future depends on it. The room felt as if it were shrinking. The words on the page blurred. She was not a daughter. She was livestock. She was a bargaining chip, a line item in a ledger, a piece of property. Her father had not just arranged a marriage. He had sold her. The 5,000 shares of Benton Rail stock, she now understood, was her price. She sat there for a long time. The letter crumpled in her fist. The shouts of the children in her school, the sound that had become her only comfort, seemed very far away. She felt a cold, hard knot of rage forming in her chest. a rage so deep and pure it almost eclipsed her fear. He found her at the school. Charles Benton. He appeared at the door of the shed 2 days later, just as she was dismissing the children. He was immaculate, in a world of dust and sweat. He looked as if he had just stepped from a Philadelphia drawing room. His dark suit was brushed, his boots were polished to a mirror shine, and he was holding a small, impossible bouquet of wildflowers. "Eliza, my dear," he said, his voice a smooth, cultured baritone. He stepped inside, his nose wrinkling slightly at the smell of chalk dust and unwashed children. The Navajo children, sensing his disapproval, vanished out the back like smoke. "Charles," she said, her voice flat. She did not rise from her small desk. He smiled, placing the flowers on her desk. They looked bright and out of place, already wilting. "I have been remiss. I should have come sooner. The colonel told me you had started this charming little project." His eyes swept the room, taking in the crude benches, the earnest, clumsy drawings of mountains. How very rustic. "What do you want, Charles?" she asked. He let the smile fade. He pulled up one of the children's benches, which looked ridiculously small beneath him, and sat down, leaning toward her. "I'm here, Eliza, because your father and I are worried. This place, it is not for you. This school, it is a waste of your talents. I think it is the first time in my life I am not wasting my talents," she said, her hands folding on her desk. Charles laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Teaching them." He gestured to the empty benches where the Navajo children had been. "My dear, you cannot teach a horse to sing. You are just encouraging them. And it is dangerous. It gives them ideas." "Good," Eliza said. "I hope it does." His eyes hardened. The polite facade was gone, replaced by the cold, assessing look of a man counting his assets. "This has gone on long enough. Your father and I have an agreement, a contract. You are a part of that contract. Eliza, you are, perhaps, the most important term. I am not a term. Charles, I am a person, and I will not marry you. Will not." He stood up abruptly, kicking the small bench away. "You think you have a choice. You think your father, that old fool, has not signed his entire fortune away on the promise of this merger. You are what seals the deal." He paced the small room, his polished boots grating on the dirt floor. "You will come back to the main quarters. You will be civil. You will accept my ring, and you will stop this pathetic little sideshow. It is embarrassing." "And if I do not?" she said, standing to face him. She was frightened, but the rage was stronger. He stopped, very close to her. He was much taller. He looked down at her, his smile returning, but this time it was all teeth. "Then you will find yourself with nothing, no money, no protection, no father to run home to. The colonel will not keep a school teacher who consorts with savages. I will make sure of it. You will be alone, here, with nothing but your ideas. And this," he said, touching the rough wood of the wall, "is a very bad place to be alone." He left. The wilting flowers remained, their scent suddenly smelling like a funeral. Eliza stood there until her legs gave out, and then she sank onto her stool, pushed to her limit. She was trapped. Briggs, her father, Charles, they had built a cage around her. She thought of the man who had also been trapped, the man who had lied to Briggs, his eyes full of shame. Taji. He was the only person who knew even a fraction of the truth. He was the only person who seemed to hate Briggs and his world as much as she now did. She made a choice. It was a reckless, desperate, and possibly fatal one. She had learned to ride at the fort. One of the friendlier sergeants, a man with a daughter her age back east, had felt sorry for her and let her use his placid mare. She was not a good rider, but she could stay on. She left the fort without permission. She told no one. She simply saddled the mare, her heart pounding a violent rhythm against her ribs, and rode west, toward the canyons, toward the place the soldiers called the Navajo line. She rode, telling herself she was just going to ask questions, about the pin, about the railroad, about the ambush. She did not know where to find him. She just rode toward the red, broken land, hoping. He found her. She had been riding for 2 hours. The fort was a tiny speck behind her. The land was huge, empty, and terrifying. She was lost. She knew it. She had stopped her horse, which was drinking gratefully from a muddy trickle of a stream, when his voice came from the rocks above her. "You are a long way from your school. Teacher," she gasped, her head snapping up. Taji was there, on his pony, looking down at her. He did not look surprised. He looked angry. He was not wearing his army jacket. He was wearing a simple buckskin shirt. He was on his way back from his village, having sent Kinyani on his mission, and was preparing to meet his squad of soldiers. And she was in his way. I was looking for you," she said, her voice trembling. He guided his pony down the slope, the animal moving with impossible sureness. He stopped in front of her. "That is a foolish thing to do. This is not your land. You do not come here, ever." "I had to," she said, desperation making her bold. "I have to know. The pin, the railroad. Charles Benton was... He was at my school. He is part of it. Is not he and Briggs? The ambush. They staged it. Did not they, to get the land? For the railroad." Tazi looked at her, his face a mask of stone. She had just spoken the truth, a truth that could get her killed, out loud, in the middle of the desert. "You," he said, "are a greater fool than I thought." He grabbed the bridle of her mare. "I am taking you back, now. Before Harris's patrol finds you, they would not be as gentle as I am." "No," she said, pulling on her reins. "I am not going back. Not until you tell me. I have a right to know what I have been dragged into." He looked at her defiant, terrified face, and he saw a reflection of his own trapped life. She was another pawn in their game, a different color, but on the same board. He sighed, a long, rough exhalation of air. He was supposed to be at the South Pass, leading 10 men on a ghost hunt, but his brother was running north. And this woman was a complication he could not afford. And yet, here she was. "I am not taking you back to the fort," he said, his voice flat. "Not now. The patrol is already out. They will see us." He looked at the sun. "You have put me in a bad place. Teacher." He turned his horse. We ride where they will not look. We will find a place, and you will not speak. You will just ride." He did not wait for her answer. He spurred his pony, and she, with no other choice, kicked her mare and followed him. He led her into the land of red rock. It was like stepping into a painting. The world of right angles and dusty parade grounds dissolved. Here, there were only curves, waves of stone carved by wind and time. He led her through slot canyons so narrow she could touch both walls, and up trails she would have sworn a goat could not climb. He moved with a silent, sure purpose. At one point, he stopped and dismounted. He walked to a pictograph on a wall, a white, painted figure, and he touched his forehead and his chest, a gesture of reverence. He did not explain. At another, he pointed. "Sacred water," he said, gesturing to a small, clear spring bubbling from the rock. "For the ancestors, not for us, we pass." Eliza said nothing. She just watched. She saw a land that was not empty, but full of signs, full of history, full of a spirit she had never known. The savagery Mrs. Gable spoke of was nowhere to be seen. She saw only a deep, profound connection to the earth. She saw a man who was not a scout or a savage, but a man who was home. Taji felt her watching him. He could feel her respect. It was different from her curiosity. It was quiet. It was observant. It unsettled him. He was drawn to it. He hated himself for it. He hated the way she looked at the land, as if she were seeing it for the first time, and seeing it, not just judging it. He reminded himself that she was one of them. She was the sister of the men who signed the treaties. She was the fiancée of the man who wanted to build the railroad. Her respect was a luxury, a passing fancy. His people's lives were not. They rode until the sun was a dying ember on the western rim of the world. Taji stopped in a shallow alcove, a scoop taken out of the side of a large mesa. It was sheltered from the wind. "We stop here," he said, dismounting. "The patrol will not come this high at night." He started a fire, small and smokeless, with a skill that looked like magic to her. He produced a piece of dried meat and a skin of water and offered them to her. She took them gratefully. They sat in silence, the fire painting flickering shadows on the rock walls. The silence was vast, broken only by the crackle of the flames. Eliza finally broke it. She looked at him, his face illuminated by the fire. He looked younger and sadder. "If you could," she asked, her voice quiet, "if you could choose, would you stay with your people and fight all of this?" She gestured to the darkness. "Or would you leave go somewhere new, somewhere there is no war?" Taji stared into the fire. He saw the faces of his ancestors in the flames. He saw the face of his grandmother, his brother Kinyani. He saw the hungry ghosts of Bosque Redondo. Then he saw the schoolteacher, her eyes full of earnest, impossible questions. He had been asking himself that same question every day for 10 years. He looked at her, and for the first time, he gave her the truth. He said nothing at all. Taji did not answer her question. He kicked dirt over the embers of the fire, plunging the alcove into a darkness so profound that Eliza felt as if she had been swallowed by the rock. She slept fitfully, wrapped in her own thin cloak, a stone for a pillow, aware of his breathing on the other side of the dead fire. When the first light touched the sky, he was already awake, standing on the rim of the rock, watching the east. "The patrol will be moving south," he said, not to her, but to the land itself. "They will be angry. They will find no tracks. An angry soldier is a stray dog. He bites anything that moves." Eliza stood, her body aching, her dress stiff with dust. "So you will take me back to the fort now?" Taji looked down at her. "No. Harris will be watching the trail back. He will be looking for me. If he finds you with me, he will have his excuse. He will say I have taken a white woman. He will shoot me, and he will not be kind to you." Eliza's blood ran cold. "Then what? Where do we go?" "You wanted to see my people," he said, his face grim. "You wanted to know the truth. You will go where I go, to the north, to the high pastures, where my brother has taken the others. It is the only safe place." He whistled, and his pony, which had been grazing in a hidden cleft, appeared. "We ride." He took her to a place the bluecoats had never seen. The journey took half the day, moving north, deeper into the dying homeland. The canyons opened up into a wide, high-altitude valley, green with grass and juniper, a hidden stream running through it. He stopped at the crest of a ridge. Below, tucked into the shelter of a red mesa, was a cluster of hogans. They were round, earth-colored dwellings, their doorways facing the rising sun. Smoke, smelling of juniper, rose in thin, straight lines. Children, naked and brown, played in the stream. Women sat at looms, their hands a blur as they wove blankets of stunning, intricate design. Sheep, thousands of them, covered the nearby hills. This was Taji's village, or what was left of it, moved in haste. As they rode down, the village went silent. The children stopped playing. The women stopped weaving. Every eye, dark and suspicious, turned to them. To her, Eliza felt a wave of fear. This was not a friendly curiosity. This was the gaze of a people who had learned to hate outsiders. Kinyani, Taji's brother, stepped out from behind a loom, a hunting knife in his hand. His face was thunderous. He looked at Taji, then at Eliza, and he spat on the ground. "You bring her here," Kinyani said in his own language, his voice loud enough for all to hear. "Have you brought the wolf to the sheep? Is this the white woman who pays you your silver?" Taji dismounted, his face rigid. "She is not a prisoner. She is lost. She is the school teacher." "She is a white woman," Kinyani shouted. "The same color as the men who hunt us. Get her out." Several other men, young and angry, Move to stand with Kinyani." Eliza stayed on her mare, her hands gripping the reins, her heart hammering. "She will not be harmed." The voice was not loud, but it cut through the anger like a sharp blade. An old woman, her face a beautiful map of wrinkles, her hair a cascade of pure white, emerged from the largest hogan. She walked with a stick, but her back was straight. She looked at Kinyani, and his angry gaze fell. She looked at Taji, her eyes softening for a moment. Then she looked at Eliza. She studied Eliza for a long time. Her gaze was so intense, so knowing, that Eliza felt the woman was reading every secret in her heart. "Grandmother," Taji said, his voice respectful. I know who she is." The old woman, Sadi, said. She spoke in slow, careful English. "She is the woman from the school. The children who came back, they speak of her. They say she draws two mountains under one sky." She turned her gaze back to Kinyani. "This one's heart does not come here with a sword. She comes with fear. Let her down." She beckoned to Eliza. "Come, eat." It was a command. Taji helped to shaking Eliza from her horse. Sadi led her into the hogan. The inside was one large, round room. It was dark, cool, and smelled of smoke, herbs, and wool. A fire burned in the center, the smoke rising through a hole in the roof. Blankets and sheepskins were piled against the curved walls. It was simple, and yet it felt more like a home than her father's Boston mansion. Sadi gave her a bowl of water, and then a piece of hot, blue-colored corn cake, baked in the ashes of the fire. It was the best thing Eliza had ever tasted. She sat for hours. She watched. She saw a short healing ceremony, a medicine man chanting over a sick child, his voice rising and falling like the wind. She watched the children play a game with stones, laughing and shouting. She tried to use the few words she had learned from the children at her school. "Ya tehe." "Hello." The people watched her. The anger had faded, replaced by a deep, cautious curiosity. The women, seeing her clumsy attempts to speak, smiled. One of them, a young mother, offered Eliza her baby to hold. Eliza, her hands trembling, accepted. The village, slowly, began to soften. Late in the afternoon, the elder, the man Taji had spoken to before, called for him. They met, along with Sadi and Kinyani, in the center of the village. Eliza, who had given the baby back, stood near the hogan, feeling she was intruding. "Briggs was here," the elder said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "While you were leading the soldiers on your ghost hunt." Taze went still. "Here, how did he find—" "He was not looking for us," Sadi said, her voice sharp. "He was delivering a message. He left it at the old canyon. He knows we watch." "What message?" Taji asked, though he already knew the answer. "An ultimatum," the elder said. He looked at Taji, and his eyes were full of a terrible, quiet blame. "He says the valley must be cleared. The railroad is coming. He has given us 3 weeks, 21 days. Then the soldiers will come, and they will not be delivering messages. They will come to move us, or to bury us." A stone of cold dread settled in the pit of Tazi's stomach. "He is one man. He cannot—" "He is not one man," Kinyani exploded, his earlier anger returning. "He is the army. And he is only this bold because he has you, his pet, his good Navajo. You led the wolf to our home. Brother, you showed them we would not fight back. You taught them we could be bought with silver." "That is not true," Taji said, his voice rising. "Is it not?" the elder asked, his quiet voice cutting deeper than Kinyani's shout. "For 2 years, you have walked his path, and now his path ends at our graves." Taji looked around. The people who had been his family, his world, were looking at him as an outcast, as a traitor. The weight of his choices, of his impossible game, came crashing down on him. He had no answer. "You are wrong." Eliza stepped forward, out of the shadow of the hogan. Her voice was shaking, but it was clear. Every head, astonished, turned to her. "Taji did not lead them here," she said, walking into the circle. She looked at the elder. "Colonel Briggs, he is a corrupt man. He is working with the railroad. He staged the attack on my stagecoach to blame your people." The elder raised an eyebrow. "We know this. They have always lied. But this is different, Eliza insisted, her desperation growing. I have proof. I have a witness. Me. I am from the East. My father. He has connections. If I go back, if I tell them what I saw, what I know, I can stop this. Kenyani laughed, a bitter, harsh sound. You, a white woman, you will stop the army. I can delay them, Eliza said, turning to him. I can write to the newspapers. I can send a telegraph to the senators my father knows. I can make them… Listen, I can buy you time. More than 3 weeks. She looked at Taji, her eyes pleading, willing him to believe her. I promise, I will not let this happen. Tazi looked at her. He was furious. His heart was breaking. She was beautiful, and she was a fool. She was making promises she could not keep, promising to stop an avalanche with her bare hands. He was enraged by her naivety, her Eastern belief that a letter could stop a bullet, and at the same time, a part of him, a part he had thought long dead, swelled with a painful, powerful admiration. She was terrified. She was in a village of people who saw her as the enemy, and she was standing up for him. She was standing up for them. She was, in her own way, braver than he had ever been. You must take me back, she said to him, her voice suddenly soft. Now, before it is too late. The ride back was tense. He argued. He told her it was pointless, that her letters were just paper. She argued back, saying that to do nothing was to be complicit. They rode hard, the argument an angry, unspoken thing between them. They were in the open canyons, halfway back to the fort, when the world changed. The wind, which had been still all day, began to gust, picking up small swirls of dust. Then it was not a gust. It was a wall. The sky, a moment before clear blue, turned a sickly, sulphurous yellow, then a deep, dark red. The sun vanished. Sandstorm! Taji yelled over the sudden, rising howl. Dismount! Get behind the horses! It was too late. The storm hit them. It was not wind. It was a solid, moving thing, 1 billion tiny, stinging needles of sand and grit that ripped at their skin and clothes. The noise was a physical weight, a deafening continuous shriek that drowned out all thought. Eliza screamed, but she could not hear her own voice. Her mare, blinded and terrified, reared, pulling the reins from her numb hands and vanishing into the red gloom. Eliza! Taji roared. He lunged, grabbing her arm just as she was about to be blown away. This way! He dragged her, half carrying, half pulling. They were blind. The world was gone, reduced to a space of 3 feet, filled with choking, screaming red darkness. She stumbled. He held her up. I cannot breathe! She gasped, her mouth and nose full of grit. Here, he yelled, his voice barely audible. He pushed her against a wall of rock she had not even seen. He was feeling his way along it, his hands bleeding. There is a crevice here. He shoved her, hard, into a narrow split in the rock. It was barely a crack, just wide enough for 2 people to stand, one in front of the other. He pressed in behind her, shielding her from the opening with his own body. The world raged outside. It sounded like a train, like 100 screaming ghosts, trying to rip them from the rock. The stone itself seemed to vibrate. Eliza, her back pressed to the cold rock, began to panic. She was in the dark, she was suffocating, and the world was ending. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. She was sobbing, but the tears just turned to mud on her cheeks. I cannot, I am… Taji felt her body shaking violently against his. She was going to break. Be still, he said, his voice close to her ear. But she could not hear him. He acted without thinking. He put his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. He held her tight, pinning her arms. Be still, he said again, his voice a low rumble. She fought him for a moment, her panic a wild thing. Let go. No, he said. Breathe. With me. Breathe. He held her, his body a solid, warm wall against her back. She was still shaking. He felt her terror as if it were his own. He did not know what else to do, so he did what his mother used to do. when he was a small boy. Frightened of the thunder, he began to sing. It was not a song. It was a chant, a low, quiet melody from the beginning of the world, a song about the holy people, about the sky and the earth. His voice, a low baritone, rumbled in his chest, and she, pressed against him, felt the vibration more than heard the notes. Eliza went still. The song was a steady, living thing in the midst of the chaos. It was a rock in the storm. She stopped fighting. She stopped sobbing. She leaned back, her head falling against his shoulder, her body surrendering to a desperate, profound exhaustion. He held her. He kept singing. The storm shrieked. He held her tighter, sharing his warmth. She was so cold. He could feel her thin frame, her heart beating like a trapped bird's. She was afraid. She was terrified of this new, overwhelming sensation. It was not just safety. It was him. His body was hard, warm, and real. He smelled of juniper smoke, of sweat, of the sand itself. It was a smell that was entirely male, entirely alive, and it went straight to a place deep inside her, a place she had never known existed. She thought of Charles, of his perfumed letters and his cold, dry hands. He was a paper doll. This man was a mountain, and she was hiding in a crack in him, and she never wanted to leave. They stood like that for hours, locked together as the world was scoured clean around them. When Eliza woke, she woke to silence. The silence was absolute. She was slumped against him, her legs numb. Taji's arms were still around her, his grip loosened in sleep, his own head resting against the rock above hers. She moved, stiffly. He woke instantly, his body tensing. He let go of her, stepping back, creating a space of air between them. The storm was gone. Eliza stepped out of the crevice. The world was new. The sky was a brilliant, washed clean blue. The red rock was scoured, smooth, and glittered in the new sunlight. The air was cold, crisp, and so clear it hurt to breathe. She turned to him. He was standing at the mouth of the crevice, his face a mask. His shirt was torn. His hair was full of sand. They looked at each other. The awkwardness was a physical thing, a sharp, new wall between them. The intimacy of the night, the raw fear, the song, his arms. It all hung in the air, unspoken and undeniable. Eliza's face flushed a deep red. She looked away, at the ground, at the sky, anywhere but at his face. "My horse." "Gone," Tazi said. His voice was rough. "We walk, or you ride." He whistled. His pony, which had somehow found its own shelter, appeared from behind a rock slide, looking annoyed but unharmed. He did not offer her a hand. He turned, grabbed the reins, and held the pony's head. An invisible line had not just been formed, it had been crossed, and neither of them, in the bright, unforgiving light of morning, had any idea what to do about it. They appeared at the gates just after sunrise. The post was waking up, the sound of a bugle cutting the clean. Cold air. The guards. Seeing Tazi walking, leading his pony, and the schoolteacher, Eliza Hart, slumped in the saddle, stared. By the time they reached the center of the parade ground, a small crowd had gathered. Soldiers, laundresses, the blacksmith, all stopping their morning routines. They saw her. Her dress was ripped, caked in red mud and sand. Her hair was a wild tangle, her face streaked with dirt. She looked less like a schoolteacher and more like a captured animal. Colonel Nathan Briggs emerged from his office, followed by Charles Benton. Charles, who was dressed for a morning ride, stopped dead. His face, usually so composed, went pale with a cold, precise fury. Briggs, however, seemed to swell. He strode toward them, his voice a parade ground boom that echoed off the adobe walls. "Miss Hart," he roared. Everyone flinched. "You were missing. We thought you lost. We thought you taken." He stopped, feet planted, glaring not at her, but at Taji. "And now you return, from the wilderness, with him." Eliza slid from the pony, her legs buckling. Taji, his face a mask of stone, made no move to help her. He simply stood, holding the reins. "Colonel," Eliza said, her voice a dry rasp. There was a storm, a sandstorm. I was lost. Taji. He saved my life. A storm, Briggs repeated, his voice dripping with sarcastic venom. He looked at the crowd, then at Charles, as if playing to an audience. A convenient storm. That lasts all night. He advanced on Taji, stopping inches from him. You were ordered on patrol, scout, to the south. You are found north, with a white woman in your possession. You have broken your orders. You have consorted with a respectable lady. Colonel, no, Eliza cried, finding her strength. That is not what happened. He is not— Be silent, woman, Briggs barked. You do not know the shame you have brought upon yourself, upon this fort. He turned back to Taji. I have half a mind to have you flogged for this. He did nothing, Eliza insisted, stepping between them. I am the one who rode out. I am the one who was lost. He found me. He protected me. Protected you, Briggs said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous sneer. The crowd was listening to every word. I am sure he did. You, Miss Hart, a woman of good breeding, vanish for a full night with a native. You return looking like this. He gestured to her. Your reputation is dead. Your honor is gone. Charles Benton finally moved. He placed a possessive, firm hand on Eliza's shoulder. My dear, you are clearly hysterical. The ordeal, it has unhinged you. He looked at Briggs. She does not know what she is saying. This savage has clearly addled her. Indeed, Briggs said. He saw his opening, the trap he had been setting. There is only one way to salvage this situation, to quiet the whispers, to restore your good name. He looked directly at Charles. A public announcement of your betrothal, a wedding, fast. A strong husband is what this woman needs, to protect her from herself. It was a checkmate. Eliza was trapped in a cage of their words. They were using her own rescue to destroy her. She looked at Taji, a desperate plea for help. He met her gaze for 1 second. His eyes were not angry. They were dead, empty. He knew this game. He turned, slowly and without a word, began to lead his pony toward the line, a dismissed, humiliated servant. As for you, schoolteacher, Briggs said, his voice full of false paternal care, you will go to your room, you will bathe, and you will prepare to accept Mr. Benton's proposal. It is the only choice you have left. She was summoned to his office after dark. She had washed the desert from her skin, but she could not wash the cold dread from her heart. She found Briggs alone, a glass of whiskey in his hand, a map spread on his desk. Sit, Miss Hart, he said. He sounded tired, as if dealing with a difficult child. Colonel, she began, sitting on the edge of the chair. I am not hysterical, and I am not a fool. What you did out there today, it was a lie. It was politics, my dear. The saving of a reputation, yours. My reputation is not what matters, she said, leaning forward, her hands clenched. The people, the Navajo. You gave them an ultimatum, 3 weeks. It is wrong. It is based on your lies, he sighed, swirling his whiskey. You just will not let this go. I was at their village, she said, her voice dropping. Taji took me there. They are just people. They are families. They are not rogues. The attack on the stagecoach, you know they did not do it. You can stop this. You can tell the truth. Briggs was silent for a long moment. He looked at her, his eyes cold and assessing. He seemed to come to a decision. The truth, he said, taking a sip, is a very malleable thing. Miss Hart, you are right. I do not care if the Navajo attacked that coach. I do not care if they are farmers or saints. They are in the way. Eliza's blood went cold. What? You are an Easterner. You believe in right and wrong. Here, we believe in progress. A railroad is coming. A great steel river of it. It will bring civilization to this God-forsaken land, and it will pass through that valley. He tapped the map. Here, the Navajo are squatting on the single best pass for 500 miles, They are an inconvenience. So you will move them. For a railroad. You will start a war for money. I will follow my orders, Miss Hart. And my orders are to secure this territory for American expansion. The railroad, the settlers, they are that expansion. The truth, he said, rising, is that the Navajo's time is over. My ultimatum is a courtesy, a kindness. I'm giving them a chance to walk away. If they do not, well, destiny can be a brutal thing. You are a monster, she whispered. I am a soldier, he corrected her. You are a teacher. Go teach your little savages their letters. But know this, in 3 weeks, their schoolhouse will be gone. Now get out of my office. She stumbled out, her mind reeling. He had admitted it. He did not care. He was a force, like the sandstorm. She walked, not to her room, but aimlessly through the dark, quiet fort. She needed to think. She found herself near the back of Briggs's quarters, the same building, but on the side. A window was cracked to let out the thick cigar smoke. She heard his voice, and another, Charles Benton. She ducked into the deep shadow of an adobe buttress, pressing herself flat. More willful than I anticipated, Charles was saying. His voice was cold, clipped. This public shaming, it may not be enough. She is a fool, Briggs said, his voice a low grumble. But she is not our main problem. The ultimatum is 3 weeks. It is too long. My father agrees, Charles said. Eliza heard the clink of a glass. He is not patient. He wants the contract signed. He needs that valley cleared. Now, this week, we need to accelerate the truth. Colonel, accelerate. We need a justification. An escalation, Charles said. The rogue band suddenly becomes a war party. They riot. They resist relocation. They become a threat. A threat, Briggs mused. Yes, I could move up the timeline. I have a better idea, Charles said, his voice dropping, but his intensity came through the wall. An accident, a fire, a tragic midnight fire at one of the Hogans. A patrol, seeing the flames, rides in to keep the peace. The savages, naturally, panic. They fire on the soldiers. The soldiers, in self-defense, fire back. By dawn, the valley is secured. It is a terrible tragedy. A police action gone wrong, but the treaty is broken. The land is clear. Eliza stopped breathing. Her hand flew to her mouth to stifle a scream. A night attack, Briggs said, his voice full of a sudden, dark energy. It is high risk, but clean. Yes, we blame the fire on them. A botched ceremony, anything. And in the confusion, Charles said, his voice like silk. It is a very dangerous place for a stubborn schoolteacher. She might be lost, a tragic casualty, a martyr to the cause of civilization. That is bold. Benton, this is a bold land. Colonel, we cannot wait 3 weeks. We move tomorrow night, at the moon's peak. Tomorrow night. They were going to burn the village. They were going to kill them all. Eliza fled, her feet silent in the dust. She reached her room, her small, dark cell, and collapsed onto the cot, her body shaking so violently she thought her bones would break. They were murderers. She sat there, in the dark, and the choice became clear. It was no longer a choice. It was a duty. If she stayed silent, she was helping them. She was loading the rifles. She was lighting the torch. She thought of Sadi's kind, wrinkled face. She thought of the children at her school. She thought of the sandstorm, the feeling of Tazi's arms around her. The sound of his voice, a low, steady rumble against her back. A song in the middle of chaos. Be still. Breathe. He had saved her. Now, she had to save him. She lit her small lamp. Her hands were steady now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp rage. She pulled out her paper and pen. She would do 2 things. First, she wrote, to the editor, the Santa Fe Gazette, Sir, I'm a schoolteacher at Fort Defiance. She wrote fast, her pen scratching. She named Briggs. She named Charles Benton. She told them about the railroad pin. And she told them about the plan she had just overheard. An attack is planned, under the guise of an accidental fire, on the peaceful Navajo village in the North Canyon. It is to happen tomorrow night. She sealed the letter. Mr. Abernathy, the kind-eyed merchant, was leaving for Santa Fe at dawn. She would slip it into his mailbag. It was for history. It was for justice. Even if it came too late. But Taji, he needed to be warned now. The letter was too slow. She had to go. She stood. She put no cloak. She took nothing. She shoved the small, brass railroad pin into her pocket. She had to get a horse. She slipped out of her room, a shadow in the shadows. The fort was dark. A lone sentry walked the rampart. The stables were at the far end. She reached the door, the smell of hay and animal warmth hitting her. She stepped inside, into the gloom. "I thought I might find you here." She froze. Charles Benton stepped out from the shadow of a stall. He was holding a small, lit cheroot. "Charles," she whispered, her heart stopping. "You are so predictable." "My dear," he said, taking a drag, the red ember illuminating his cold eyes. "So emotional. I saw you run from the colonel's office. I saw the look on your face. You were going to do something foolish." He took a step toward her. "And here you are, going for a night ride." "Get out of my way," she said. He laughed. "No, I do not think so. You are a complication, Eliza, but you are also an asset, and you are my asset. You are not going anywhere." He grabbed her arm, his fingers biting into her flesh. "You are going back to your room, and you are going to be a good, silent fiancé. You are going to burn them," she said, her voice dead. "You are going to kill those children. I am going to build a railroad," he corrected, pulling her close. His face was inches from hers. "It is the price of progress. Now, stop this melodrama." She knew she could not fight him. He was too strong, so she did not fight. She sagged against him. She let out a sob. "Oh, Charles, you are right," she whispered, her voice breaking. I am so frightened. I am so alone. Briggs, he said I needed a husband to protect me." He was surprised. He had expected a scratching, biting cat. He got a broken bird. His grip on her arm loosened. Just a fraction. It was no longer a manacle. It was a hold. "Well," he said, his voice thick with smug victory. That is better. You see, it is not so hard to be reasonable." "I know," she whispered. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with false tears. "You are right. We should talk about the wedding." He smiled, his vanity blinding him. He leaned in, savoring his triumph. "Yes, my dear, we should." Her hand, which had been hanging limply at her side, came up, not in a caress, in a fist. She drove all her weight into it, her knuckles slamming directly into his throat. He made a sound, a choked, wet gag. His eyes bulged. His hands flew to his neck as he staggered backward, trying to suck in air that would not come. Eliza did not watch. She grabbed the reins of the sergeant's mare, the horse she always rode, ripped the knot, and threw herself onto its bare back. "Stop," Charles wheezed, his voice a broken rasp. "Guards, stop her!" A soldier on the wall heard the shout. "What is at the stable?" Eliza kicked the mare, hard. She burst from the stable doors, galloping across the parade ground. "Halt!" the guard yelled. A rifle shot cracked the air, the bullet whining past her ear. The main gate was closed. She was trapped. She veered, yanking the mare's head, and galloped straight for the low wall by the supply sheds. The wall near her school. It was her only chance. The mare, sensing the panic, bunched its muscles and leaped. It was not a clean jump. It scrambled, hooves clattering on the adobe, and tumbled over the other side, landing hard. Eliza was nearly unseated, but she clung on. Grabbing a fistful of mane, she kicked the horse again, and they vanished into the night, back in the fort. Briggs had run out, suspenders down. Charles was on his knees, gasping. She is gone, Briggs roared. Charles staggered to his feet, rubbing his throat. His eyes, in the moonlight, were full of murder. She is, he rasped. She has gone to them. Briggs froze. He understood. She is warning them. She has just, Charles whispered, a terrible smile spreading on his face. Given us our excuse. She is not a victim. She is a traitor. She has joined the hostiles. Briggs's mind, a military instrument, saw the opening. She is the riot. He turned to his adjutant. Sound the call. Forget tomorrow night. We move in 1 hour full company. We are going to rescue the schoolteacher. Far to the north, in the high, cold pastures. Taji stood on a cliff edge. He could not sleep. He had been watching the fort. A tiny, hateful light in the vast darkness. Suddenly, a different sound. Not the wind. Not an animal. Thump, 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 thump. A drum. From the south. A watcher. A warning. Kenyani was at his side, his face pale. Brother. The beat was fast, urgent. Soldiers. Many. Now. Taji closed his eyes. It had come. The lie he had lived was over. He had thought her safe in the fort. He had been wrong about everything. But he knew the soldiers were coming. And they were coming to kill. He leaped onto his pony. The fires, he roared to his brother. Light the signal fires. Wake the village. Wake everyone. They are here. The high pasture, which had been a sanctuary, became a trap. Below, in the main valley, the first torch arced through the night, landing on the dry roof of an empty hogan. It went up in a silent whoosh of yellow flame. No, Taji whispered. He had been too late. The drums, the signals, the soldiers had moved faster than a warning could travel. He spurred his pony, a reckless, desperate plunge down the rocky trail. Kenyani and a dozen other young fighters were right behind him. He could hear the screams now. Not war cries. The cries of women and old men, woken from sleep by fire. He hit the valley floor just as a line of blue-coated soldiers, on foot, advanced. They were not firing. They were just herding, pushing the panicked Dine toward the center of the camp. And they were carrying torches. This is not a rescue, Tazi snarled. It was a pogrom. He saw Kenyani, his brother, leap from his horse onto a soldier who was about to set fire to Sadis, their grandmothers. Hogan, the soldier, surprised, dropped his torch. Another soldier raised his rifle, aiming at Kenyani's back. Kenyani, Tazi roared. He launched himself from his own pony, his body a solid weight, slamming into the second soldier. The rifle fired, the bullet going harmlessly into the night sky. Get back, get to the rocks, Taji yelled at his brother, dragging him to his feet. They are burning our homes, Kenyani screamed, his face a mask of rage. It is a trap. They want us to fight. Tazi shoved him. Get the old ones out now. A voice, sharp and commanding, cut through the din. Do not fire on the scout. I want Tazi alive. He is a witness. The rest of them are resisting. It was Briggs. He was on horseback, on a small rise, watching his plan unfold. A soldier, one Taji knew, a young private named Miller, leveled his gun at an elder. Move, old man. Do not shoot, Taji yelled, running toward him. I have my orders. Taji, Miller said, his face pale and sweating in the firelight. He was terrified. They are unarmed. He is resisting. It was then, in that perfect, terrible moment of chaos, that a new sound joined the battle, the sound of a single horse, ridden at a dead gallop, coming from the darkness behind the line of soldiers. Halt, a guard yelled. Who goes? The horse burst through the surprised line of soldiers. It was Eliza. She was riding the bare-backed mare, her hair a wild, streaming banner. She was not screaming in fear. She was shouting, her voice high and clear, a desperate, brilliant lie. Hold on, she cried. In English. Help is coming. The telegraph, I sent the telegraph. The Gazette knows a general from Santa Fe is coming. She reined the horse. which was rearing in terror. In the center of the burning village, between the soldiers and the dean, "Anasazi," she shouted, using the one word the children had taught her for white soldier, pointing at Briggs. "You bodied, he is a liar." Her gamble worked. For one precious second. Everyone stopped. The soldiers, hearing General and Santa Fe, hesitated, looking at each other in confusion. The Dine, hearing this white woman, who they had seen in their own camp, screaming in their defense, paused their flight. Eliza, her chest heaving, pointed a shaking, dirt-stained finger directly at Colonel Briggs. Charles Benton was at his side, his face a mask of pure, cold shock. "He did it!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Colonel Briggs! He is the one. He is working for the railroad. He hired the men who attacked my coach." She fumbled in her pocket, her fingers closing on the small, sharp piece of metal. She pulled it out, holding it high, the brass pin. It flashed, tiny and bright, in the light of the burning homes. "The Benton Rail, I have the proof he hired them to blame your people, and he is here tonight to burn you out. I heard the plan. I will testify. I will go before a military court." It was all out. The truth, finally, set loose in the desert night. The silence that followed was absolute. Colonel Briggs's face, which had been pale, turned a deep, mottled purple. He had been exposed. In front of his men, in front of his victims, by a schoolteacher. He lost control. The mask of the paternal, strategic commander vanished, replaced by a raw, snarling beast. "Arrest her," he roared, his voice breaking with fury. "Arrest that woman. She is a traitor. She consorts with the enemy. She has abandoned her people. She is... a renegade. Seize her." Charles Benton, his composure regained, smiled. It was a thin, terrible smile. He looked at Eliza, as if she were a misbehaving child. "You see, my dear," he called, his voice carrying easily. "You have no one. You have made your choice. You are a hostile now, and we know how to deal with hostiles." 4 soldiers, their faces grim, began to advance on Eliza, rifles raised. "Get off the horse, ma'am." Eliza looked at them. Then she looked past them, at Taji. He was standing, frozen, halfway between his brother and the soldiers. He was watching her, his face unreadable in the flickering light. This was the moment. The line he had walked for years, the line that had already snapped, was now a canyon at his feet. He could stay silent. He could remain the good scout. He could watch her be taken, watch her be destroyed. He could save himself, or he could not. Eliza looked at him, and her eyes did not ask for help. They were not pleading. They were just watching, waiting, seeing. Finally, who he was. Taji took one slow breath. He tasted the smoke of his family's burning history. He looked at Briggs. He looked at the soldiers. Then he moved. He did not run. He walked. He walked past the soldiers who were advancing on Eliza. He walked past the body of an elder, one of the men who had accused him. He walked until he was standing directly in front of Eliza's horse. He put his hand on the mare's bridle, and then, slowly, deliberately, he turned his back on Colonel Briggs. He turned his back on the United States Army. He turned his back on the silver coins, the lies, the blue coat, and the entire white man's world. He stood in front of Eliza, a shield made of flesh and blood, facing the rifles. "From this second," Taji said, his voice quiet, but it carried a deep and resonant sound that cut through the night. "If you shoot at both of us." He looked up at Eliza, his face finally clear. "A Navajo and an innocent white woman. Shoot!" The challenge hung in the air. Briggs, his face contorted, raised his arm. Fire on them both. They are traitors." "No." Kenyani screamed. It was a war cry. He launched himself, not at a soldier, but at a stack of burning hay bales, pushing it over, creating a wall of flame. The battle broke. It was not a battle. It was a brawl. Kenyani and the other young fighters, who had been hiding, attacked from the shadows, a desperate, suicidal charge to save their families. Some soldiers, the ones loyal to Briggs, fired into the crowd. Other soldiers, the ones who had heard Eliza, the ones who had seen Tazi stand, they hesitated. They fired high. They shot into the dirt. They were men, not monsters, and the truth of the night was suddenly very, very gray. In the chaos, Charles Benton drew his own pistol. He did not aim at Tazi. He aimed at Eliza. "No, you do not!" he snarled. A bullet cracked the air, just as Eliza's horse reared. The shot went wide, but another, from a soldier, did not. Eliza felt a sudden, sharp, burning line of pain. She looked down. Her sleeve, at the shoulder, was ripped open. A dark, wet stain was spreading on the cotton. Blood. She wavered in the saddle, a wave of dizziness and shock washing over her. "Taji?" He was there. He had seen her hit. He grabbed her, pulling her from the horse's back just as she was about to fall. He half-dragged, half-carried her, shoving her behind a large, solid wall of rock. "Kenyani!" he roared. "The canyon, the narrow pass, get them out!" He pressed her against the stone, his body covering hers. The sounds of the fight were muffled, chaotic. Bullets sparked off the rock above their heads. He looked at her arm. It was a graze, long, bloody, but not deep. The bullet had passed through, but she was shaking, her whole body trembling in violent, uncontrollable spasms. The retreat was a blur. The dying, using the chaos Eliza had created, were vanishing. They were a people of shadows, and the soldiers' fire and confusion were the perfect cover. Kenyani and the young fighters held the line just long gasp enough, then melted away. Taji pulled Eliza deeper into the labyrinth of stone. They ran, they stumbled, they climbed, until the sounds of shouting and gunfire were a dull echo behind them. They joined the stream of refugees, old women, crying children, wounded men, all heading for the one place the soldiers could not follow, a narrow, high-walled canyon. He did not stop until they were deep inside, in a side cave he had played in as a boy. It was high up, dry, and absolutely silent. He pushed her inside. Into the total darkness, she collapsed, sliding down the rock wall until she was sitting in the dust, her breath coming in ragged, tearing sobs. Taji fumbled in his pouch, his hands shaking. He struck a match. The tiny flame lit the space. He had a small, clean cloth and a skin of water. He knelt in front of her. "Your arm," he said, his voice rough. I... She could not speak. She just shook. He lit a small, dry piece of juniper he found in the cave, the flame giving off a meager, smoky light. He reached for her, to push up her sleeve. "No!" she cried, flinching away from him, curling into a ball. "Do not touch me!" He froze. She was not talking to him. She was talking to the night, to the fire, to Charles, to her father, to all of it. "I cannot," she whispered, her voice breaking. She was crying now, the sobs ripping out of her. "I cannot do this. It is too much. I am too weak." She looked at him, her eyes wide and black with terror in the tiny light. "I am going to break. I am going to break apart. I cannot—" Her words, "I'll break," hit him harder than a bullet. He saw it. He saw her, this woman, who had been raised with soft hands and gentle words, who had been thrust into a world of casual, brutal violence. She had fought. She had been strong. And now, she had reached her limit. Her mind, her spirit, was shattering. His own hands were shaking. He, who had never hesitated in a fight, was trembling as he knelt before her. He looked at her bleeding arm. He looked at her tear-streaked, sand-caked, beautiful, terrified face. He reached out. Slowly. He did not touch her arm. He touched her cheek, his rough, callous thumb brushing away a tear. "I know," he whispered. His voice was thick. Then I'll break with you." She stopped crying, her breath catching in a gasp. She looked at him, confused. "I'll break with you," he repeated, his voice a low, fierce vow. "If you fall apart, I will be the one holding the pieces. You understand I will not leave you, not in the storm, not in the fire, not now. You are not alone, never again." He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. They were just two people, in the dark, in a cave, while their world burned. She let out a long, shuddering breath. "I am so scared." "I know," he said. "So am I." He moved, his hands gentle now. "Let me see." He pushed up the torn, bloody sleeve. The graze was long, but clean. He poured water on the cloth, the sound loud in the silence. He began to wipe away the blood, his touch so light it was almost a whisper. She watched him. His face, in the small light, was full of a terrible, tender concentration. He was not a warrior. He was not a scout. He was just a man, holding her together. When he was finished cleaning it, he had nothing for a bandage. He looked at his own shirt. Then, without a word, he tore a long, clean strip from the hem of his own buckskin shirt. He wrapped it, gently, around her arm. She looked at the bandage. She looked at his face. "Taji," he said nothing. He just looked at her. The space between them was so small. It was full of her pain, his vow, the smoke, the blood. She did not know who moved first. Perhaps they both did. His lips touched hers. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of desperation. It tasted of salt, of her tears. It tasted of smoke, of the world ending. It was a drowning man's first breath. She kissed him back, her hands coming up, not to his chest, but to his face. Her fingers tangled in his hair, as if she were holding on to him to keep from flying apart. He pulled back, just an inch. "Eliza, do not," she whispered. "Do not. Let me go. I am still breaking." His arms went around her, pulling her close. His mouth found hers again, and this time there was a new fire. It was not the fire of the burning hogans. It was a different, deeper heat. It was the heat of a life that had been saved, of a choice that had been made. Her hands moved from his hair, to his shoulders, to the front of his shirt, her fingers gripping the buckskin. She was still a virgin. She had never been touched. She had never been held. She had been sold and bartered and threatened, but she had never, ever been chosen. He laid her back gently on the cave floor, on a bed of soft, dry sand, his body shielding her from the cold rock. His hands were in her hair, pulling the pins, letting it fall. His lips moved from her mouth to her cheek, to the pulse that was hammering in her throat. I do not know," she whispered, as he unbuttoned her torn dress, his fingers clumsy but gentle. "I know," he whispered back, his lips against her skin. "It is all right. Just be here, with me. There is no one else, only us." He covered her body with his, a blanket against the cold, a shield against the world. He was slow. He was tender. He was everything Charles, and her father, and Briggs were not, and when they finally became one, in the sacred darkness of the cave, it was not a breaking, it was a mending. It was the sound of two shattered pieces, finally, fitting together. Later, she lay curled against his side, his arm heavy and warm across her, the light from the juniper ember long dead. She was not shaking. She was still. "If we die tomorrow," she whispered into the darkness. "If they find us, and we die, I am not sorry. I am not sorry I came here. I am not sorry I found you." Tazi pulled her closer, his hand stroking her hair. He had crossed a sacred line. He had bound himself, his dying soul, to this white woman. He had defied his ancestors, his people, his own rules, and he felt, for the first time in his entire life, that he was not a traitor. He was, finally, whole. "We will not die tomorrow," he whispered, his voice a promise in the dark. "We will live. I chose you, and I will not let you go." The dawn was a cold, gray wound in the sky. They emerged from the cave not as a warrior and a teacher, but as two people who had made a vow in the dark. The air was sharp and bitter, thick with the smell of ash. Below them, the valley was a scene of grim theater. The blue-coated soldiers had not left. They had formed a tense perimeter around the blackened, smoking circles that had been homes. Higher up, at the mouth of the narrow canyon. Taji's people were gathered a silent, watching line of survivors, armed with old rifles, bows, and a defiant stillness. It was a standoff, balanced on the edge of a second massacre. Eliza looked at Taji. Her arm throbbed, a dull, aching reminder of the night. The bandage he had made from his shirt was a stark white against her skin. "I am not sorry," she said, her voice quiet. The words meant only for him. "Nor am I," he replied. His face was grim, his eyes on the soldiers below. "But it is not finished. I must go to them. My grandmother—" "We will go," Eliza said. She did not look at him. She looked at the men who had burned the village. "You have to protect them. I have to expose him." They began to walk, not to the high canyon, but down, straight toward the line of soldiers. They walked out into the open, a man and a woman, a target. A soldier saw them. "Halt, they are coming down," Colonel Briggs, who was on horseback near his command tent, turned. Charles Benton, his face a mask of pale, bruised fury, was at his side. A look of triumphant hatred crossed Briggs's face when he saw them. "There!" Briggs roared, pointing. "The traitors, they show themselves, seize them!" A squad of soldiers, rifles at the ready, moved to intercept them. "Colonel Briggs!" The voice was new, sharp, and full of an authority that made Briggs, and every man in his command, freeze. A party of riders was approaching from the east, not soldiers in patrol worn blue, but men in crisp, new uniforms, and 2 men in dark, severe suits. They were led by an officer with silver oak leaves on his shoulders. "A major." "Who in the goddamn hell are you?" Briggs bellowed. His authority challenged. The officer reined in his horse, his cold eyes sweeping across the scene, the smoking ruins, the armed soldiers, the terrified dying on the ridge, and finally, the 2 approaching on foot. "Major Harrison, Santa Fe Territorial Command," the officer said, his voice like ice. "I am here on direct orders from the governor, and this—" He gestured to one of the suits, a thin, ferret-like man who was already scribbling in a notebook. "Is Mr. Davies, from the Santa Fe Gazette?" Eliza's heart leaped so violently she thought it would break free. Her letter, the merchant. It had worked. The journalist, Davies, pushed his spectacles up his nose. "Colonel Briggs, a fascinating scene. My telegraph from Santa Fe said you were conducting a rescue mission for a Miss Hart, who had been abducted by hostiles." His eyes landed on Eliza. "You must be Miss Hart." "She is," Briggs shouted, recovering himself. "And she is clearly a traitor, having joined them. We were fired upon." "That is a lie," Eliza said, her voice clear and strong. She did not shout. She walked past the soldiers, directly toward Major Harrison. "Major, my name is Eliza Hart. I am the schoolteacher. I was not abducted. I fled Fort Defiance to warn these people of an illegal attack." "Miss Hart," the major said, his face stern. "Those are very serious accusations. They are the truth." She was in the center of them now, a lone woman in a torn, bloody dress. "I was a passenger on the stagecoach that was attacked 2 weeks ago. The attackers were not Navajo. They were white men, dressed in fake feathers, wearing army boots. Colonel Briggs was told this, and he buried the report. She had their full attention. And I know who they worked for." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small, brass pin. She threw it on the ground at the major's feet. "The Benton Rail Company." Charles Benton flinched as if she had thrown it at him. "I overheard Colonel Briggs and Mr. Benton," Eliza continued, her voice ringing with a desperate, cold fury. "They planned this. They planned to set a fire and blame the Dine. They planned to break the treaty to clear this valley for their railroad. This was not a police action. It was a premeditated massacre for profit." Taji had come to stand beside her. He looked at the major. "I am Taji. I was a scout for Briggs. I told him the tracks were wrong. I told him that they were shod horses. He ordered me to be silent." Kenyani, seeing Taji and Eliza, bounded down the ridge, followed by other young men. "And I saw the surveyors," he yelled. "Weeks ago measuring the sacred land, far from the line. Briggs let out a sound of pure, disbelieving laughter. "This is absurd, Major. Are you going to listen to this, a hysterical, compromised woman, a disloyal scout, and a savage boy? I am the commanding officer of this post. And this is my jurisdiction, mister. Benton and I are the victims here of a vast native conspiracy." "Is that so?" Colonel Mr. Davies, the journalist, said, his voice mild. He held up a sheaf of papers. "That is a fascinating theory. Especially in light of these—" "What are those?" Briggs snarled. "They are copies, Colonel, of your letters," Davies said. "And Mr. Benton's. It seems your associates at the railroad were very, very meticulous note-keepers, especially regarding payments, fees, expenses for the clearing of hostile territory." If Briggs' face had been red with anger, it was now a waxy, corpse-like white. Charles Benton went absolutely still. The journalist had not just brought the major, he had brought the evidence. This is forgery," Briggs stammered, but his voice was weak. The bluff was over. "Is it?" Major Harrison said, his voice flat. "Because I have in my pocket a warrant for your arrest, Colonel, and one for you, Mr. Benton, for conspiracy to defraud the United States government, and for inciting a military action under false pretenses." The world seemed to stop. The soldiers from the fort looked at Briggs, their leader, and saw not a commander, but a criminal. The men who had fired, the men who had lit the torches, suddenly looked ashamed and angry. Charles Benton had been silent. Now, he started to laugh. It was not a sound of humor. It was a high, thin, breaking sound. "No," he whispered. "No, I do not think so." Before a single soldier could react, Charles moved. His polished, civilized veneer shattered, and the desperate, cornered animal beneath tore itself free. He grabbed Eliza. He was faster than anyone anticipated. He yanked her back against him, his arm a steel bar across her throat, and in his other hand, a pistol was suddenly pressed, hard, against her temple. "No one moves!" Charles screamed, his voice a ragged shriek. He dragged her backward, toward his horse. You did this," he snarled, his eyes, full of a mad fire, locked on Taji. "You goddamn savage! You think you have won? You think you can take my property?" He shook Eliza, the gun barrel scraping her skin. "If I go down, she goes down. You hear me, she dies." Eliza was frozen, the cold metal a final, absolute reality. She could not breathe. Taji looked at the scene. He looked at Charles, a man who believed the world, and everyone in it, was his to buy or to burn. He looked at Eliza, her eyes wide with terror, but not surrender. He saw the night in the cave. He heard his own voice. "I will not let you go." He remembered every time he had stood down, every time he had bowed his head, every time he had swallowed a lie to survive. That man was dead. "Let her go, Benton," Taji said, his voice dangerously calm. "Or what?" Charles mocked, his laugh hysterical. "You will throw a rock at me. You are nothing. You are." Taji did not wait for him to finish. His hand shot out, not to his own knife, but to the holster of the soldier standing nearest to him. It was Private Miller, the young, terrified soldier, who was staring, paralyzed. Taji's hand closed on the grip of the man's revolver. He pulled the gun, raised it, and fired in one single, fluid motion. It all happened in the space of a heartbeat. The bang of the shot was flat and loud, the only sound in the world. Charles Benton screamed. It was not a word, but a high-pitched animal sound of pure agony. He did not fall. He simply let go of Eliza, his body convulsing. His pistol clattered to the rocks. His right hand, the one that had held the gun, was a ruin of red, bloody meat, the bullet having gone clean through, shattering the bone. Eliza stumbled forward, free, collapsing to her knees, gasping for air. Tazi stood, the smoking revolver still in his hand. He had not killed him. He had chosen. He had shot a wealthy white man in front of a dozen witnesses. He knew, better than anyone, what that meant. He let the pistol drop from his fingers, hitting the dust with a soft thud. The standoff was over. The spell was broken. Major Harrison's men surged forward, seizing Charles, who was now on his knees, howling and cradling his destroyed hand. "Colonel Briggs," Major Harrison barked, "you are under arrest." This time, the soldiers who moved were the major's. They pulled Briggs' arms behind his back and snapped iron cuffs onto his wrists. Briggs did not fight. He was a hollowed-out man. His career, his power, all of it was gone. His eyes, burning with a venomous, impotent hatred, found Eliza, and then Taji. "You!" he hissed. "You will hang for this, boy. I will see it. And you, woman, you are nothing. A savage's whore." He was dragged away. The valley fell silent. The smoke was still rising. Tazi went to Eliza, pulling her to her feet, his hands gentle on her arms. He held her. It was over, but it was not. Major Harrison, his face grim, walked toward them. "Miss Hart, Taji, you have both of you done an incredibly brave thing. You have exposed a rot that runs deep." Eliza looked at him, hope, desperate and bright, flooding her. "Then it is finished. The ultimatum, they can stay." The major's face tightened. He looked away, at the smoking ruins, and then at the Dinah, who were slowly, cautiously, beginning to move from the ridge, Sadi and the elder at their front. "The threat from Colonel Briggs is finished," he said, his voice heavy. "The immediate attack is over, but, Miss Hart, the policy, the railroad, the contracts, the government in Washington. They still want this land. I cannot undo a decade of policy with one arrest." The hope in her chest turned to ice. "But we proved it was all a lie." "You proved this was a lie," Harrison corrected, not unkindly. "My report will delay things. It will cause a scandal. It will stop the Benton rail line, in this valley, for a long time. But I cannot promise you, forever." He looked at Taji. "You shot a white man, an unarmed one, at the end." "He was holding her hostage," Private Miller said, stepping forward, his face pale. "We all saw it. He was going to shoot her." Major Harrison nodded, a flicker of a smile. "I know. Private, I saw the same. Under the circumstances, I saw nothing but a man defending a civilian. You are free, for now." He turned back to Eliza. "Miss Hart, my men and I will secure the fort. We will, of course, provide you with a full escort back to Santa Fe or wherever you wish to go." Eliza looked at the major. Then she looked at the smoking ruins of her schoolhouse, a small, dark patch near the fort. Then she looked at Taji. He was watching her, his face quiet, waiting. He had made his choice. Now, she had to make hers. "Thank you, Major," she said, her voice steady. "But I am not going back. I am staying." "I am home." Major Harrison looked at the two of them, standing in the ashes, a man and a woman from two worlds that had just collided in fire and blood. He looked at the long, hard road ahead of them. He sighed, a sound of profound exhaustion. "God help you both." He tipped his hat, turned, and began shouting orders, his voice the sound of a new, and just as uncertain, day. The shock waves of that night in the valley spread faster than a prairie fire. The Santa Fe Gazette, with Mr. Davies's name proudly on the byline, landed at Fort Defiance like a bomb. It did not just report. It accused. It named names. The Arizona conspiracy. The headline screamed, "Army Colonel and Railroad Heir implicated in land grab scheme. Innocent Navajo massacre averted by schoolteacher." The story was read aloud in the barracks, in the sutler's store, in the officer's mess. It was devoured. Major Harrison, now in command, was forced to conduct public interviews, his face a mask of grim duty. The political fallout was immediate. Colonel Nathan Briggs was transported in irons to Santa Fe, his trial for treason, conspiracy, and murder the talk of the territory. Charles Benton, thanks to his father's vast wealth, simply vanished. He was moved under armed guard, supposedly for his own trial, but a rumor, strong as the wind, said a wagon full of gold had met his escort near the border. He was, most people believed, in Mexico. His wounded hand and his shattered pride the only souvenirs of his time in Arizona. Benton Rail, its name now synonymous with corruption and violence, issued a public, indignant denial from its offices in Philadelphia. But the damage was done. The government in Washington, facing a scandal, immediately suspended all contracts related to the valley. The railroad, the great steel beast, was forced to stop. Its surveyors were recalled. Its path, its glorious, profitable path, was blocked. They would have to go around, a detour that would cost them millions, a detour that was 100-mile scar of their defeat. For Eliza, the victory felt distant, a thing happening in newspapers, not in her life. Her world had shrunk to the high, cold pasture, to the smell of ash, and to the man who now rarely left her side. A new courier, a nervous young soldier who did not meet her eyes, brought her the letter. It had been forwarded from Santa Fe. She recognized her father's hand, and her own hands began to shake. She read it in the privacy of the small, temporary hogan Sadi had given her. Taji sitting outside, a silent, watchful guardian. It was not a letter. It was an execution, an utter, final, and catastrophic disgrace. You have not just ruined yourself, you have ruined me. The Benton name, which was to be our salvation, is now our curse. The shares I was given are worthless. Our good name, our standing in society. You have dragged it through the mud of your own base, animalistic impulses. We are a laughingstock. I have been told what you did, what you are living unmarried. With that savage, you have made your bed. It is not just your honor you have destroyed. Eliza, it is the honor of this entire family. You are no longer my daughter. I have no daughter. Do not write. Do not return. You have made your choice. May God, in His infinite mercy, forgive you, for I never will. She read it twice. She felt nothing. The words were sharp, but they could not cut her. The person they were aimed at, the Eliza Hart who feared her father's disapproval, was a ghost. She was a different woman now, one who had been forged in fire and held in the dark. She did not burn the letter. She folded it, calmly. She walked outside. Taji stood as she approached, his eyes questioning. She showed him the letter. "My father," she said, "he has disowned me." Tazi took the paper. He could not read the words, but he understood the tone. He understood the sharp, angry black lines. He handed it back to her. "He is a fool. He does not know you." "No," she said, looking at the letter, then at him. "He does not." She walked to the communal fire, the one where the women were cooking corn. She dropped the letter into the flames. She watched it curl, blacken, and turn to ash. "My future," she said, her voice quiet but clear, "is my choice, not his." She turned and met his gaze. "My future is here." For Taji, the battle was not with paper, it was with blood. He had made his choice, but he had made it for himself. Now, he had to face his people. They gathered, not in anger, but in a deep, profound sorrow. The elder, Haston, his face heavy, sat opposite him. Kinyani, his brother, stood with the other young men, his arms crossed, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. "You have brought this," one of the men said, his voice hard. "For 2 years, you have eaten the army's bread. You have worn their blue. You showed them our ways. You showed them our weakness. And when they came, she," he gestured toward Eliza's hogan, "was the one who warned us, not you. You were a wolf, pretending to be a sheepdog, another accused, and you led the other wolves to the flock." Taji sat silent. He did not defend himself. He let the words, the accusations he had told himself for years, wash over him. He had to hear them. He had to own them. Kinyani stepped forward, his voice tight. "Brother, they are right. You let us believe you were one of them." He was. Sadi's voice cut through the air. She walked, with her stick, to the center of the circle. She stood beside Tazi. "He was one of them," she agreed, her sharp black eyes scanning the accusers. He was their scout. He was their eyes. He was their ears. And he was ours. She pointed at Hastian. Your wife? Her sickness. Who brought the medicine from the fort? When the agent said we had none, she pointed at the man who had spoken first. Your son, when he was lost in the snow, who found his tracks? When every other man had given up, who led the army patrol away from this valley on a fool's chase? For 2 years, she turned to Taji. He has walked 2 paths. He has carried 2 hearts. And it was a lie. A lie he told them, and a lie he told us. A lie that kept us alive. Yes, he brought them, but he is the only one who knew how to fight them. She looked at her grandson, her face softening. If he had not been their wolf, he would not have known their smell. He would not have known their tricks. And when the fire came, he made his choice. He turned his back on their world to stand with ours. She smiled, a small, grim smile. And to stand with her, he has chosen. He is no longer walking 2 paths. He is making a new one. Here, with us. Now, the question is, will you let him? Taji looked at his grandmother, and the terrible knot of guilt that had lived in his stomach for years. It did not vanish, but it loosened. He had not been a traitor. He had been a man trying to hold back the ocean with a cup, and he had, finally, forgiven himself. Eliza, too, was building. She walked through the ruins of the burned valley, her arm healing, her mind clear. She had lost her school, her family, her old life. And she had an idea. She did not go to Major Harrison. She did not write to a church. She went to Sadi and Hastian as they sat by the loom. I want to build a new school, she said, her voice firm. Sadi nodded. The fort, yes, Major Harrison is a good man. He will give you a new shed. No, Eliza said. Not at the fort. She took a deep breath. Here. The weaving stopped. Hastian looked at her as if she had grown a second head. Here in the valley, a white woman's school. Not a white woman's school, Eliza said, her passion making her words tumble out. A school for everyone. My children from the fort, the laundress's children, the soldiers' children. They can come here. And your children, Kinyani's children, when he has them, they can learn together. This is madness, Hastian said. Is it? Eliza challenged, kneeling in the dust. You are afraid of the white world. They are afraid of you because you do not know each other. Your children, they can learn English. They can learn to read the treaties. They can learn to read the white man's laws, so they are never, ever cheated again. And the white children, they can learn your language. They can learn of the 2 mountains and the 1 sky. They can learn that this is a sacred place, not just empty land to be stolen. She looked at Sadi, her eyes pleading. Mr. Davies, the journalist, Major Harrison, they respect me. They will help. They will protect it. It can be a bridge. The only bridge. Sadi looked at her for a long, long time, and then she began to laugh. It was a low, rusty sound. A school, here, to teach the white children not to be white. It is the craziest, most beautiful idea I have ever heard. We will do it. The news from the fort was small, but real. Private Miller, the young man whose gun Taji had used, had put in for a transfer. I am done, sir, he told Major Harrison. I did not sign up to burn homes. 2 of his friends did the same. They were disgusted. They were tired. The soldiers who stayed, however, were changed. They had seen their colonel in handcuffs. They had read the newspapers. The savage was not the enemy they had been taught. When they rode on patrol now, they did not go near the high pasture. They kept their distance. The war, for a little while, was over. That night, Eliza and Taji walked to the edge of the canyon, to the place they had first looked down on the village. The moon was a sliver, the stars a riot of cold fire. They will let me build it, she said, her voice a quiet note of wonder. Sadi, she agreed. I know, he said. She will make Hastian and the others build it. It will be hard, Eliza said, pulling her thin cloak tighter. The white families, they will be afraid to send their children here. And my people, Taji said, will be afraid to let them come. She looked at him. And us, they will hate us. Your world will look at me as what Briggs called me, a whore, a renegade. And my world has already thrown me away. He turned to her. He took her hands. They were not soft, Eastern hands anymore. They were chapped and rough and strong. Let them hate us, he said, his voice low. I am willing to stand beside you and let my people whisper. I am willing to be the man who chose the white woman. I do not care. My choice is made. They will not. We cannot be married, she said, the word strange on her tongue. There is no law, no church. That would have us. We do not need their law, he said. We have this. He gestured to the land, the sky. We have Sadi and Hastian. He was right. The next day, as she and Taji were drawing plans for the school in the dirt, Sadi and Hastian approached. The building will be round, Hastian announced, as if it were his own idea. Like a hogan, but with windows, many windows, for the light. Yes, Eliza agreed, smiling. Sadi looked at Eliza. You have no people. Your father has thrown you out. You are a stone in the river, with no bank. Eliza's smile faded. Yes, I suppose I am. This is not good, the old woman said, shaking her head. My people, they do not understand. They see you. They see you are with him, she pointed at Taji, who was watching, but you are not bound. You are an outsider, a ghost. They are afraid of ghosts. Eliza looked at Taji, her heart sinking. So, Sadi continued, a small smile playing on her lips. We must fix this before the school, before the wedding. If you choose one day to have one, we must bring you in. You cannot be a ghost. What? What do you mean? Eliza asked. Hastian stepped forward. Tomorrow, when the sun is high, we will have a small ceremony. A blessing. We will wash away your white name, and we will give you a Dine name. We will bind you, not to him, but to us, to the people. He looked at her, his eyes serious. You will be received. You will be one of us. You will be home. Then the people will not whisper. Then they will see. 1 year passed. The seasons in the high desert were unsparing. They brought a winter of deep, silent snows and a summer of blazing, red rock heat. And in the center of the valley, a new thing grew. It was not a hogan, and it was not a white man's house. It was a circle, like the hogan, built of sturdy, rough-cut pine. But it had large windows, a thing of strange luxury, to let in the bright, unforgiving sun. It stood on the very spot where the fire had burned the hottest, a stubborn, living thing grown from the ashes. This was the school. Inside, it smelled of new wood, chalk, and juniper. The walls were covered with clumsy, bright drawings on slate and paper pictures of horses, sheep, and 2 mountains standing beneath one sky. The benches and tables were solid, their surfaces sanded smooth, built by the hands of Taji and a now grudgingly proud Kenyani. Eliza stood at the center of it, a blackboard, her one true luxury. Behind her, she was no longer the woman who had stepped off the stagecoach. Her Eastern dresses were gone, replaced by a simple buckskin skirt and a practical cotton blouse. Her hair was not in a severe bun, but in a long, dark braid, just like the other women of the village. Her hands were stained with ink and chalk dust. She looked at the children, a noisy, beautiful crowd of 20. Half were Dine, their black eyes bright with curiosity. The other half, including the laundress's daughters and, surprisingly, Private Miller's 2 young sons, had made the journey from the fort. Today, she said, her voice clear, we will read the story of the coyote. A cheer went up. She spoke, and her words were a fluid mix of English and the language of the Dine, a tongue she now spoke with a fluency that surprised even herself. The children, in turn, answered her in a mix of both. They called her Miss Hart, and they called her Hoso, the name Sadi had given her, the name that meant harmony or walking in beauty. She was the teacher of two worlds. Taji watched from the doorway for a moment. He did not come in. It was her space. He was on his way out, his pony saddled, a small pack tied behind it. He was not a scout. He would never wear the blue coat again. He was a man of his people. But he was also, as Hastian had said, a bridge. He met with the traders now, not for silver, but to barter the wool from the tribe's new, larger flock. He guided the occasional journalist, like Mr. Davies, or the government agents who now came, hat in hand, to speak to the elders, not to command them. He guided them, on his terms, along his paths. His life was his own. The news had trickled in over the year, carried by couriers and old newspapers. Colonel Nathan Briggs, after a sensational, press-filled trial in Santa Fe, had been found guilty. He was in a military prison in Kansas, a broken, disgraced man. The great Benton Rail Company, facing federal investigation and public outrage, was mired in lawsuits. And Charles Benton, he had simply ceased to exist. Rumors from Mexico told of a one-handed American, flush with gold, who had been killed in a card game. No one knew for sure. He was just gone. The great threat had receded, like a mountain range in the distance. But Tazi knew the truth. The world was still full of smaller threats. Drought, sickness, the casual greed of settlers. The railroad was gone. But the policy, the piece of paper in Washington that said this land was empty, was not. The fight was not over. It had just changed. He watched Eliza for one more second, the way the sun from the window caught the side of her face. He turned and swung onto his pony. Riding out, he had a promise to keep. He returned 3 days later, as the sun was setting, painting the cliffs a deep, bloody crimson. The village was alive with activity. Fires were burning. The smell of baking corn and roasting meat filled the air. He found Eliza near Sadi's hogan. She was wearing a new dress, a soft, dark blue cotton, simple and unadorned. "You are late," she said, smiling. The trader from Santa Fe was slow, he said. He dismounted and unstrapped a small, carefully wrapped package from his saddle. But he was not empty-handed. He handed it to her. She unwrapped it. Inside, folded in layers of soft paper, was a shawl. It was not a Navajo blanket. It was white, made of fine, eastern lace. Eliza's breath caught. "How?" "A letter came," Taji said, pulling the letter from his own pouch. "For you." She recognized the handwriting. It was not her father's. It was her younger sister, Anna. Her hands shook as she opened it. "My dearest Eliza," it read, "I have read the newspapers. I do not care what father says. He is a fool. What you did. You are the bravest person I know. I am sending this from my own dowry chest. I hope it finds you. I hope you wear it. I hope you are happy. Please know, one person in this house still loves you." Eliza did not realize she was crying until Tazi's thumb, rough and warm, brushed a tear from her cheek. "It is time," he said, his voice soft. The village gathered in the shadow of the great mesa, the one that sheltered the valley. There was no church. There was no white-robed preacher. There was only the red rock, the endless sky, and the community. Hastian, the elder, stood before them, his face serious, but his eyes kind. Sadi stood beside him, her small frame radiating a powerful, ancient dignity. Tazi and Eliza walked to the center, hand in hand. She wore the lace shawl, a strange and beautiful contrast to the red earth. A piece of her old world laid gently upon the new. There were no rings. There was no book. Sadi held a simple clay bowl, filled with water from the sacred spring. Hastian held a small, blue corn cake. "A marriage is not a paper," Hastian said, his voice quiet. "But it carried in the still air. It is a path. You choose to walk it together." He looked at Taji. "You are a man of the Dine. You will not walk ahead of her, to pull her. You will not walk behind her, to push her. You will walk beside her. This is your promise." I will walk beside her, Taji said, his voice clear, his eyes on Eliza. Hastian looked at Eliza. He used her new name, the one Sadi had given her. Hosho, you are a woman of the Dene now. This land is hard. The path will be rough. You will not run when the rocks are sharp. You will not run when the storm comes. This is your promise. I will not run, Eliza said. Her eyes locked with Tazi's. Sadi held the bowl. Tazi drank. Eliza drank. They drank from the same water. Hastian broke the corn cake. They ate from the same food. They were one. It is done, Sadi announced, a smile cracking her wrinkled face. Now, she said, to everyone, we eat. The village erupted in cheers. Children ran. Drums began a low, steady beat. It was a celebration. Later, when the moon was high and the fires were low, they slipped away. They walked, hand in hand, away from the celebration, away from the village, following the familiar path to the narrow alcove, the crack in the rock where they had sheltered from the sandstorm. They stood there, in the same cool darkness, the same starlight spilling over the canyon rim. It was silent. I remember that night, Eliza whispered, her voice so low he barely heard it. She leaned her head against his chest. Here, I was so terrified. I know, he said, his arms going around her, pulling her close. I told you I would break. She looked up at him, her face a pale oval in the moonlight. I was so sure that I would just shatter into 1,000 pieces. But you did not, he said. No, she said, a small, slow smile spreading across her face. I did not. She raised a hand, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. I am not afraid of that anymore. I am not afraid of breaking. No, he asked, his own voice thick. No, she whispered. She pressed her face against his chest, her arms locking around him, holding him as tightly as he had held her. Because I know, even if I did, I would only be breaking into your arms. He held her, and he kissed her. He kissed his wife. The wind moved, a low, soft sigh through the high canyons. Below them, the schoolhouse, a small, dark circle of hope, was quiet. The smoke from the hogans rose in straight, peaceful lines to the stars, and far in the distance, miles and miles away, the great, relentless railroad, the engine of progress, was forced to go the long way around. The West was not a kind land. It did not forgive weakness. It was a place of hunger and fire and dust. But sometimes, just sometimes, it gave its greatest rewards to those who had the courage to choose love and the strength to demand justice, even when every map and every law told them to give up. For Eliza and Taji, the future was not a promise of happily ever after. It was a promise of reality. There would be drought. There would be sickness. There would be new, unfair policies from men in cities far away. But they were not alone. They had each other. They had a community. And they had a school. A tiny light in the vast, dangerous, and beautiful dark. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where in the world you are listening from, so please let us know in the comments. It is amazing to see how far these tales travel. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to our channel, Wild West Tales, and giving this video a like. And for extra support, hit that hype button. It really helps the story get heard by more people.